The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. And today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is Chapter 11. It's titled Corporate Control of Politics, page 170. During the bruising primary election season of 2008, a right-wing group put together a 90-minute hit job on Hillary Clinton and wanted to run it on TV stations in strategic states. Federal Election Commission ruled that the advertisements for the documentary were actually campaign ads and thus fell under the restrictions on campaign spending of the McCain-Feingold Act and thus stopped them from airing. Corporate contributions to campaigns have been repeatedly banned and in various ways since 1907, when Republican President Teddy Roosevelt pushed through the Tillman Act. Citizens United, the right-wing group, sued to the Supreme Court with right-wing hitman and former Reagan Solicitor General Ted Olson, the man who argued Bush's side of Bush v. Gore, as their lead lawyer. This new case, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, presented the best opportunity for the Roberts Court to use its 5-vote majority to completely rewrite the face of American politics, rolling us back to the pre-1907 era of the robber barons. And if there was one man to do it, it was John Roberts. Although he was handsome with a nice smile and photogenic young children, Roberts was no friend to average working Americans. If anything, he was the most radical judicial activist appointed to the court in more than a century. He'd worked most of his life in the interest of the rich and powerful and was chomping at the bit for a chance to turn more of America over to his friends. As Jeffrey Toobin wrote in The New Yorker, quote, "In every major case since he became the nation's 17th Chief Justice, Roberts has sided with the prosecution over the defendant, the state over the condemned, the executive branch over the legislative, and the corporate defendant over the individual plaintiff. Even more than Scalia, who has embodied judicial conservatism during a generation of service on the Supreme Court, Roberts has served the interests and reflected the values of the contemporary Republican Party." End of quote. And the fastest way the modern Republican Party could recover its power over the next decade was to immediately clear away all impediments to unrestrained corporate participation in electoral politics. If a corporation likes a politician, it can ensure that he is elected every time. If it becomes upset with a politician, it can carpet bomb her district and with a few $1 million worth of ads and politically destroy her. In the Citizens United case, the Roberts court listened to arguments and took briefs and even discussed it among themselves as if they were going to make a decision. But instead of deciding the case on the relatively narrow grounds on which it had originally been argued, whether a single part of a single piece of legislation, in this case McCain-Feingold, was unconstitutional, the court asked for it to be re-argued in September 2009 and asked that the breadth of the arguments be expanded to re-examine the rationales for Congress to have any power to regulate so-called free speech by corporations. In this, they were going along with a request from Theodore B. Olson, who argued Bush v. Gore and would not just look at this narrow case, but go back nearly 20 years to re-examine and perhaps overturn their own ruling in the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, where the court held that it was constitutional for Congress to pass limits on corporate political activities, as well as its decision in 2003 to uphold McCain-Feingold as constitutional. The setup for this 2010 decision came in June of 2007 in the Federal Election Commission versus Wisconsin Right to Life case, in which the Robert courts ruled that the FCC could not prevent Wisconsin Right to Life from running ads just because it was a corporation. The idea of Congress passing laws that limited corporate free speech was clearly horrifying to both Roberts and Scalia. Scalia went after the 1990 Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, in which the then Rehnquist court had ruled that the Michigan Chamber of Commerce was limited in its free speech in a political campaign because it was a corporation. Scalia complained this Austin was the only pre-McConnell case that this court had ever permitted the government to restrict political speech based on the corporate identity of the speaker. Austin upheld state restrictions on corporate independent expenditures, and God forbid the statute had been modeled after the federal statute the BCRA 203 amended. End of quote. The Austin case, Scalia concluded, with four others nodding, was a significant departure from ancient First Amendment principles. In my view, it was wrongly decided. Scalia was quoted at length from opinions in the Grosjean v. American Press 1936 case. In Scalia's words, quote, holding that corporations are guaranteed the freedom of speech and of press, safeguarded by the due process of law clause of the 14th Amendment. He also quoted the 1986 Pacific Gas and Electric Company versus Public Utility Commission of California case. The identity of the speaker is not decisive in determining whether speech is protected. Corporations and other associations, like individuals, contribute to the discussion, debate, and the dissemination of information and ideas that the First Amendment seeks to foster. The bottom line for Scalia was, quote, the principle that such advocacy is at the heart of the First Amendment's protection and is indispensable to decision-making in a democracy is no less true because the speech comes from a corporation rather than an individual. The book, Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and we're going to do a meet your congressman, have a conversation with Mark. Someday maybe we'll brand these things, but Congressman Mark Pocan is with us today for the first hour. He'll be taking your calls. And he's in the studio with us. Yeah. Congressman, it's great having you in the studio.
It's great to be here. I love your studio.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's we try to make it comfortable.
Oh, this is awesome.
It seems to work well. So if you have a question or a call for Congressman Pocan, our number is 202-809-9925. And Chris will have that up on the screen, too, so give us a shout. So, Congressman, what is, well, first of all, what's on your mind? I'd like to give the first 10 minutes basically to you to just rant on whatever you think is the most important stuff going on.
I'll tell you, I mean, I think what we're hearing the most from constituents on a couple of things. One is just this Muslim ban that, you know, they're trying to use their alternative facts to say it's not a ban on Muslims, but clearly that's the intention. And when they're talking about finding a path for maybe Christians from these countries, they've even made it worse, you know, when they start to explain that. We're hearing a lot about that. We're hearing a lot from people about specifically on the different appointees, but Betsy DeVos and Andy Puzder seem to be the top two that people are calling about. And Betsy DeVos, we know now there's two Republican senators that they're going to vote against. So there's potential for that to really have an ability to kill it, or Mike Pence might have to himself come in and be the deciding vote on that, which I don't know when that's
which
been
he'll
done.
do. I mean, I mean, they're blowing up rules left and right.
Right. Well, rules. What's that?
We don't mean those.
This is the Trump administration. Come on, we don't have those. And I think just some of the executive orders this week, you know, we're hearing there may be one today around the religious liberty laws that allow people to discriminate. We're waiting to see if that's going to happen. But there's just a lot to juggle every single day. And, you know, I think what I'm hearing more than anything, and we're doing a live Facebook town hall tonight on our Facebook page I think it's at 6:30 Central Standard Time.
Mark Pocan,
Mark Pocan, yeah.
Mark Pocan Facebook page.
Yeah, because so many people, I mean, I'll tell you, there's a lot of angst out there. No matter where I go, whether it's in an airport in Washington, D.C., whether it's back home in Wisconsin, anywhere else I've been in between, people just don't, they've got the angst and they want to do something. They're trying to figure out how to focus it. So we're trying to help do that. So we posted a video yesterday kind of explaining to people, double down on the groups you care about. Pick your 1 or 2 or 3 issues that you think are most in jeopardy and volunteer and donate money to those causes, because that's where you can have the impact with our collective voices. Let's magnify our voices by working through those groups. And if they have a legal arm, all the better, right? Because legal challenges are going to help us, I think, even more than anything in these dark days. So we'll do what we can as the legislative arm of the resistance, but we need everybody kind of magnifying their voices by working with those groups. And so we've been doing a lot of work around that, because I think, as you know, I think the more we can help people get organized and be more powerful, the more likely we are to stop a lot of these things from happening.
Right. And a fine thing it is. What's your best advice for how to lobby? People have to lobby their senators right now, with regard to all this stuff. And, there's a lot of people. I was standing outside Chuck Schumer's house. I mean, these things are happening all over the country of, block the nominees, stop the Supreme Court guy who, we discovered this morning when he was in high school, in his prep school, while his mom was EPA chief, I think, while she was screwing up the EPA on behalf of Reagan. He started the Fascism Forever Club at his high school. Oh, I get it. It was probably,
Bannon must be so proud.
Yeah, it was probably, lighthearted and all that kind of stuff. He thought a bunch of liberal professors will be, I can't criticize him for that, because I got kicked out of high school for publishing an alternative newspaper. And challenging the administration of my high school. I mean, I literally got kicked out of high school for that. And my dad was the guy who was printing it for me, and he was a conservative Republican, and I was taking all these anti-war stands, but he was like, your First Amendment rights, how dare they? Like, wait a minute. My dad, who took me to the John Birch Society meeting.
Oh, no.
But he believed in freedom of speech, So anyhow, what's the best way for people to lobby a senator? You're a member of the House of Representatives, a congressman, but the Senate is where all the stuff, the buck stops.
This is where the votes are happening right now on the confirmation. So, people should reach out to your senator. The best thing you can do is try to call them, or if you can, set up face-to-face meetings with the offices, if you're back in district, because it's important that they're hearing from their constituents. Quite honestly, if you live in Wisconsin and you call a senator from Michigan, you're not going to have a lot of impact. It's just we are so limited on how we can respond to people. But you have to contact your senators. And then again, that's why I say double down with those groups that are working on organizing our voices, because maybe your senators are both supportive that they're going to vote against these nominations. But if you're working with whatever group is organizing around fighting the actual nomination, that helps magnify. They can then take your help and your resources and your assistance to help get other people in those important states to actually do those calls. So that's what I recommend all the time is working with those grassroots groups to be even more magnified in that voice. But reach out to the senators and let them know your personal reasons, your personal stories. I think even an email, you just got to remember, if you mail something to Washington, D.C., we don't get it for 3 weeks because it has to be screened.
For anthrax.
Yeah, exactly. So, that will happen way after these votes. But you can do a quick email, you can do a quick phone call, and, the Indivisible guide that's out there that some former staff put together, I think is a great resource for people to take a look at and kind of figure out what to do.
Yeah, we had Angel Padilla from that group on this week and last week, and they're just exploding. I mean, between them and Larry Cohen and Our Revolution, the echo of Bernie's campaign. Mm-hmm. Those two groups are just, Larry, I saw him on Sunday, and he was telling me how, they called a meeting for, I forget the town, but it was like some obscure town someplace.
Oregon, I think it was.
Yeah, and they were expecting like 40 people or 50, and 700 showed up. Yeah. It's like, everything is exploding right now. And they're, metaphorically, and there's some, really great groups out there and some really great stuff, So that's great advice. That is really, really great advice. And also, I wanted to get your thoughts, and then we'll hit a break and we'll start taking phone calls. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the Republican Party's proposing a national right to work law. Right to work for less is, for those of you who don't know, is very simple legislation that keeps intact the federal mandate that requires unions to offer lawyers or other services to any employee of a company that has a union in it. This is required by law. The unions must do this, and it's very expensive. It's one of the most expensive things the unions do. And so-called right to work for less laws or right to work laws
say, the individuals no longer have to pay union dues, but the unions are still required to provide services to individuals. This, of course, breaks unions. This is like passing a law that says that if anybody walks in off the street to a lawyer's office and says, I want you to, handle my divorce, or I want you to, sue the president for me or whatever, they have to do it and you don't have to pay them. It's bizarre. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a freeloader law, right? I mean, to allow those people. But this is my argument. In Wisconsin, we were one of the recent states to do right to work. We didn't have it in place for a long time. There was a giant coalition of contractors and unions together, over 400 businesses opposed going to right to work. And the reason is they're responsible business owners who understand, my union, Painters and Allied Trades, I've had a union business for now 29 years.
So you run a union shop?
Absolutely, run a union shop. And out of that, we get apprenticeship programs where we get people trained to come in. So there's actually a benefit to that business to have highly qualified, skilled workers to come in from day one that you don't have to go through and train because they've got the union apprenticeship program. So the contractors love how this works out. They've had labor peace, and it helps them to be profitable. So if it's not good for employees and it's not good for responsible business owners, the only people it's good for are the fly-by-night folks that try to undercut those responsible businesses and try to have a race to the bottom on wages. That's not good for anyone. That's just a few people going to make some short-term profits.
Yeah, absolutely. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us for the hour, taking your calls. And the phone number 202-808-9925. We'll be back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. There's a lot going on in the world. If you have, any questions about what's going on in Congress, what's going on in the United States, what's going on. This is just like, what a wild time to be. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Congressman Pocan's contact information, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan, REPMARK POCAN. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Ivory in Oroville, California. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Mr. Pocan. I was just wondering if you supported there was an online movement, and it's called the Justice Democrats, and they're trying to build up a grassroots force to take over the Democratic Party and stuff because of all the corporate Democrats and stuff in there. I was just wondering if you knew about it and what did you think about it?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the organization, Ivory. I am a strong supporter of Keith Ellison for the chair of the DNC for probably some of the same reasons why you're looking at the Democratic Party and saying why it needs some changes. I think the idea that you put someone in there because they're going to raise a lot of money, they're going to go to the pharmaceutical companies and say, hey, you gave us 100,000 last year, can you do 150 this year? We know what that means. It's not good for the party. It's not building from the grassroots. What we need to do is really take, I think, the movement that surprised a lot of people in the Democratic Party, that people like Bernie Sanders created, and make sure that we're taking it within the party. So it's not necessarily about a single individual, but it's about all the races up and down the ballot, from state legislative to local elections to congressional and Senate races. And Keith Ellison is that person who's like the perfect hybrid, right? I mean, he was active with that movement that Bernie created, and yet at the same time, he can be taking that across the country at all levels of government and how useful that can be. So again, Ivory, I don't know specifically about the movement that you're talking about, but I can tell you there's a lot of people who want to democratize the Democratic Party, go figure. And I think that the best way we can do that is this month, make sure that we get Keith Ellison elected as the DNC chair. And you can do that by reaching out to your DNC member in your state. And I believe we may have shared a list with
you. Did, and in fact, I got a more, that one didn't have contact information.
Oh, okay.
I got one from Larry Cohen over at Our Revolution that had contact information for about 3/4 of the people.
Perfect.
And I don't know if we posted it yet or not. I think we did because I forwarded it to Sue and to Sean.
Great.
So I'm pretty sure it's up there. So, okay. And Samantha in Fort Myers, Florida. Samantha, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi.
Hi, Samantha.
Sorry. I'm just starting out, trying to familiarize myself with the political atmosphere. And I've been learning a lot lately. And the reason I'm calling is I was curious about the refugee ban, the Muslim ban.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious about 8 U.S. Code 1182 and the 1951 Geneva Refugee Convention. And I was wondering if one negates the other. I'm confused how we're supposed to take in refugees according to the Geneva Convention, but according to Code 1182 F, the president, the inadmissible aliens. I'm sorry, I'm so nervous.
No, don't be nervous,
I was
Samantha.
just wondering, like, if one negates the other, I guess is the best way I know how to ask it.
Well, I mean, we've had a tradition of taking in refugees, as have other countries, and unfortunately, this is flying in the face of that tradition, and that's why so many other countries have looked at us and saying, "What are you doing by doing this?" This is a very discriminatory ban. Even though they say it's not a Muslim ban, it clearly is. In fact, their own words when they said they might start allowing Christians from these countries reinforced that it's a discriminatory ban. I think it's unconstitutional. We'll be able to fight it at that level, but get active with those local and national groups working at it and keep listening to programs like this to keep informed. Thanks, Samantha.
There you go. Thank you, Congressman. We will be back with more of your calls for Congressman Mark Pocan right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and in the studio with me, Congressman Mark Pocan. He is the first vice chair of the House Progressive Caucus, number 3 guy in the House Progressive Caucus. Is actually a BFD. It's a big deal in my mind, anyway.
The caucus is
great.
great.
For you.
We have 75 members. We're growing still. I think we have either one short or one shy of all the new freshmen have come to the Progressive Caucus, the largest values-based caucus within the Democratic Party, and that's where the power is, right? We work with the outside groups, and we're leading the resistance in Congress.
Well, that's the amazing thing about the last election was that the genuine progressives got elected generally. I'm going to sneeze. Oh, excuse me. And I didn't even I don't think I hit the sneeze button. My apologies to those of you listening. But in any case, the people who actually ran as progressives got elected fairly handily. It was the people who tried to walk down the middle line and say, well, I'm a little this and a little, they were having the problems. But anyway, this is your time and your time. So let's pick up some phone calls here. Nick in Yorkville, Illinois, listening on WCPT, AM 820 out of Chicago. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Nick.
Congressman Pocan, thanks a lot for doing this. We appreciate it.
Of course, Nick.
I heard yesterday or the day before a great reference for this law called the Country Club rule. And let's say you guys want to, you want to pay for your Country Club private dues. But then I don't want to pay the dues, but I feel like golfing that day. I should be able to go in there regardless, right? I know it's a rhetorical question, and I'll leave it up to you.
So
guys.
you're talking about right to work. Yeah, the right to work for less, actually. I
Nick,
always try to use that phrase.
Yeah, it's a good point, and one of the other things that we always try to remind people, too, about right to work is there are multiple studies that show people who belong in unions are going to make about 27% more on average than people who don't.
Yeah, $6,000 per year per household in a union in one of the states that allows unions. You make $6,000 a year more than in the 28 states that have done right to work for less.
Yeah, and I think that's just, that's a big part of what's going on is they're just going after that. But you and I both know, because we're both small business owners, the fact that responsible small business owners don't support this change should say something, right? The fact that in Wisconsin, 400 contractors opposed going to right to work means businesses didn't ask for it. So this is purely either a political thing to try to destroy unions.
To defund the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
That's really what it's all about. And Republicans have been upfront about that since the 40s.
Yeah, and that's what the whole collective bargaining changes in Wisconsin, what we refer to as the uprising, when Act 10 happened in Wisconsin. I was told by Republicans this is to go after power for the Democratic Party.
There you go. Ellie in Fresno, California. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Hi. I've been thinking about how to improve the Democratic Party to make it very strong in lieu of Congress ever passing a publicly funded campaign bill across the country. I think if the Democrats said we will not take any corporate donations and no candidate running for office will take any corporate donations, I think Bernie showed he'll get more money than you know what to do with.
Well, Ellie, thank you.
Yeah, Ellie, so when I was in the Wisconsin State Legislature, I was the author of the 100% public finance bill. I think that that's the best way. Take money completely out of it. In this Congress, with this president, that's not going to happen. I think the magic of what happened with the Bernie's campaign was that we showed a lot of small donations can come together and become a big force. And you can actually run campaigns and not have to go to that pharmaceutical company and all these other companies and beg for dollars. And of course, you know that they want access and they want influence. Instead, you can do it from the grassroots. So I think I've noticed a real change here. I've watched Chuck Schumer bring in Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Tammy Baldwin into leadership, understanding that there's something to the progressive grassroots movement. I've watched now the Senate stand up more and more to these nominees, even in areas where they may not have opposed in the past. They're understanding that's where the people want them. So I think we're having that impact right now. The fact that, millions of people, not Donald Trump millions, but real millions of people came to those marches right after the inauguration, the women's marches across the country, tells me we've got something. And we just have to now get it organized so that people can take that anger, that disappointment, that concern and put it into action. And we can do that if we work with those organizations out there, national and local, that are working on these issues.
Cool. Meg in Dallas, Texas. Hey, Meg, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan. We have about 2 minutes to the break.
Oh, not a problem, Tom. I live in Dallas, Texas. My senators are Cruz and Cornyn. Calling their office, I feel like I almost feel like when I call them and for example, about the immigration ban. They're polite, but it's almost like when you hang up the phone, it's like, yeah, who cares? I hate to say it, but that's the feeling I get when I call my senators. I belong to the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, Planned Parenthood. I just don't feel like my voice is heard when I call my senators.
Well, two things, Meg. One, they do record those calls, pro and con. So if they get a lot of people saying they're doing something wrong, it ultimately may have an impact because they have to look at that.
By record, you mean they mark it down?
Yeah, not record your voice, but actually mark it down so they know there's 400 people who said this and 300 people who said that. And don't forget, you've got senators who are up for re-election. So you're going to have Ted Cruz up, and there's several people already talking about potentially running. If you don't like what their views are, then change the faces of who's in Congress, and you can work on that. But I applaud you for working with the groups you mentioned are three of the best groups that are working on these issues right now. Just keep that up because your help to those groups is going to help someone in a swing state. And look, on Betsy DeVos, right now we have two senators from Alaska and Maine who, because of the calls of their constituents, have now said they're going to vote no. All we need is one more person, or they're going to have to bring in Vice President Pence to do a historic having to come in and be the deciding vote for a cabinet secretary. That was
the thing I got from. That was the thing I got from the Progressive Caucus. Was here is a list of 4 senators. Maybe it was from another group. There's a list of 4 Republican senators that
reach out to
are broadly thought of as being reach-outable.
Yeah.
And I'll dig through and I'll get that out. We'll do that later on. Meg, thank you so much for the call. Thank you. And we'll be back with more of Congressman Mark Pocan after this break for the news and all here at the bottom of the hour. Stick around. Congressman Mark Pocan in the studio with us for the hour, taking your calls. His website, Pocan, POCAN.house.gov. And you can tweet him at Rep, R-E-P, as in Representative Mark Pocan.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
That's Rep, R-E-P, M-A-R-K, P-O-C-A-N. That's the Twitter handle, at, all that kind of stuff. We'll be right back with more of your calls. If you want to have that, because of the climate crisis, because we are looking at mass dislocation of hundreds of millions, billions of people over the next generation, which will almost certainly lead to wars and crises and famines and diseases. And I mean, some serious stuff is coming down the road as a result of the climate crisis, which, is only gently being addressed, particularly in the United States. In fact, in the United States, it's, quote, still controversial, which is such nonsense. But in any case, he's saying that the answer is to have fewer children. He's like, I'm not going to bring, multiple kids into this world. Life is going to be tough. And I understand that. He says a valuable philosophical contribution here is the difference between making people happy and making happy people. He said, when I feed a hungry person or prevent a harm from befalling somebody, I improve a person's well-being. But when I create a person whom I will then feed and prevent from harm, I make a person who will predictably be well off. And in the first case, I add happiness to the world, whereas in the second case, I added happiness by creating a person who will be happy. See the difference? He gets into this whole philosophy thing and says, I would argue that it is more anti-life to prioritize creating new life over caring for or even not harming those who already exist. Now, one of the arguments that people push back against, bioethicists and whatnot who are saying we should have smaller families rather than large is, you don't want to be in the situation of Japan, where the population is aging and there's fewer people for the workplace. Oh, my God. Well, there's an interesting story this morning about how we can kind of generally broadly expect that over the next decade, we're going to lose about 5% of our jobs simply because automation is getting so much better. Artificial intelligence, robots, what used to take 10, 15 people to make, on an assembly line is now done with one or two robots. What used to take 15 checkout clerks in a supermarket is now done with one person supervising self-checkout machines. And every day this is, the tellers in banks are being replaced by an app on your phone. Increasingly human labor is becoming less important. And so if we're going to have a 5 or 6% decrease in the need for our labor force, do we really want to be growing our population? I think that, an aging and thus shrinking population like Japan has, like Germany has, although Germany's has changed right now because they're taking all these immigrants in from Syria. But, an aging and diminishing population actually drives up the price of labor. It increases the demand for labor, which increases wages, which stimulates the economy from the bottom up, and which produces a positive outcome. In fact, the best example of this is what happened with the bubonic plague in the 1340s, I think it was, or the 1430s, I forget which, but it was back in the day, right? When a third of the population of Europe died from the Black Plague. What happened? A third of the population, gone. What happened? What happened was the Renaissance. People went from being serfs, from being the property of the owners of the land on which they lived, along with the land. They went from being the property of people to becoming independent men mostly, but work people, workers. And they were able to set their own wages. And in fact, they started forming guilds, what today we would call unions. The Masons came out of that era, at least in a more modern form. And as people were able to charge more for their labor, because there was more demand for labor, because a third of the population was dead, people were able to charge more for their labor. People were able to work fewer hours and have more leisure time. And what did they do with that leisure time? They invented democracy. They invented music. I mean, they didn't invent this stuff, right? But it was like, all this brilliant writing that came out of the Renaissance, the art that came out of the Renaissance, the music that came out of the Renaissance, the cultural transformation that came out of the Renaissance, that all set the stage for the Enlightenment, which was just 4 generations, just 100 years later, coming along again as a consequence of a change in the dynamic between labor and the labor market. It wasn't because a bunch of people died off the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment came about in large part because new lands were being discovered that could be exploited in Africa and in the Americas, and great wealth was being taken back to Europe. It was the Enlightenment, you could say, was this wonderful thing that helped bring about the United States, but it happened because the white Europeans were able to rob, rape, and pillage North America, Central America, South America, and Africa. But it came about as a result of a change in those labor markets. So should we have fewer people? Is that an obligation? Is that an ethical thing to have fewer children?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Congressman Mark Pocan in the office, in the studio here with us, and taking your calls. And boy, we have a Colorado, Pennsylvania, Texas, New York, California, Illinois, New York, and Washington State. So let's start with Maxine in Louisville, Colorado. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan. Oh, Maxine, we ask people not to be on speakerphone, and sometimes when people try to take it off speakerphone, they hang up by accident.
There you go.
We just lost Maxine. Call us right back. Richard in Warrenton, Pennsylvania. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind?
Thanks for taking the call, Tom, and thank you, Congressman. Language is so important. You guys talk about the right to work, and I wish everybody would just constantly be on message like the Republicans are. It's right to work for less.
Right.
It's not global warming, it's global climate change. And most importantly, I think it's not voter fraud, it's election fraud. So my question to you is, why are the Democrats so hesitant to bring up Chris Kovach's interstate cross-checking, and what's your view on that? And how can we mobilize people to get this and keep it on the radar?
Have you seen Greg Palast's hour-long documentary on this?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely supportive. This is something we have to keep highlighting so people understand that as a part of it. But I think I totally agree with your comments about election fraud. It's so important that we say it in that context. I think there's a whole lot more. In fact, we are working on something that hopefully in the next week or so we'll be releasing that's going to go extensively into this area. I sat down yesterday with John Lewis for about a half hour going over. He's going to be supporting our constitutional amendment to guarantee a right to vote. But we have to go the full spectrum from things like voting rights to the election problems. And don't forget, Wisconsin, where I'm from, is one of those states where Scott Walker put in photo ID requirements, eliminated some of the early voting, and we went from being one of the top turnout states in the country to I think we fell to number 6 or 7. And a lot of that was because of those voter suppression issues. And then there's the outright fraud issues, from taking people off of the list to be able to vote to, I would argue, voting machines are something that we need to talk about more as well. So, Richard, your point is well spoken, and I think we are going to be talking about those issues a lot more in the coming future.
Good. I'm convinced that if it weren't for interstate crosscheck, Hillary Clinton would be president right now, and we'd have a Democratic Senate. But that's just me and my personal
that and a few other issues I think that really stand out.
Yeah. Deanna in Conroe, Texas, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, Representative or Congressman Pocan. I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I am very, very, very concerned, and that's still putting it mildly, about the outright fascism that's taking place right before our eyes in this country. And I'm very disappointed in the Democratic response right now. My specific questions for you are, how exactly does the Democratic members of the House plan to resist this fascist regime, which I'm not going to name? The white supremacist in the White House right now, who is basically writing orders and, possibly going for a coup. Are you, in the Democratic members, are the Democratic members willing to obstruct? Is that something that you still aren't willing to do because we're trying to take the moral high road, even if it means getting nothing done this session? Also, we're being bombarded every single day, and the latest information is the leaked anti-LGBT executive order that will come out. How do you all plan to fight this? Bottom line, what is the Democratic Party waiting on to start fighting this fascist? And I mean fighting, resisting, obstructing, getting this to stop, because people are starting to die from the ACA, from the Muslim ban, from, now we're not going to have LGBT protections. People are going to die. And I need to know if I need to just leave the Democratic Party now because they're not willing to step up and fight, or if you guys have a plan and you're going to fight this.
Sure.
Thank you, Dean.
Deanna, thank you for your comments. And, I can tell you, as you can imagine, when you turn a cruise ship, it takes a little while to do that. And trying to get the Democratic Party to completely change, we've been working on it. And I think we're having some strong success. As I mentioned, Chuck Schumer has been putting people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Tammy Baldwin to the leadership. He's standing up. They're going to try to do everything they can to stop the Supreme Court nomination. They're voting now much more against all the nominations. Things are moving in the right direction, but just it does take a little longer. I used to say back home when I was in the state legislature, things move like a tortoise. Things in Washington move like an upside down tortoise, right? It's just part of the giant bureaucracy that we're dealing with sometimes that I guess we have to ask for a little bit of patience. But I can tell you from being here, watching it, I am watching what you want happen within the Democratic Party. I am watching members who want to fight back and figuring out the best ways to fight back. And a lot of it is we have the ability to talk about these things. We have a national audience. So I was on the floor today of Congress with a map showing the countries where Donald Trump has his business interests that weren't part of the Muslim ban, to talk about those conflicts of interest. And they afterwards said, they try to use the rules saying I was somehow insulting the president or whatever the words they used. We don't give a damn. We're going to keep doing what we've got to do, and we're going to try to use that megaphone to get that message out there. But there is a lot going on at work, and I see the movement within the party and the leadership moving to where you and I want it to go. So I know it's hard to say patience when you watch bad things happen every single day with the Trump administration, but we need your help as well. We need you to be reaching out to folks and joining those groups that I've talked about, because we're the legislative arm of the resistance, but the resistance is every single person, including yourself, across the country. We all need to do this together. So I know the answer is not as quick as you'd like to have it. I'm just pragmatic enough that I've watched. It is tough to get this to move, but it's moving in the right direction, and we are resisting. And I think you're going to see a lot more actions like you would like to see happening, like we did when we had the sit-in over the gun violence issue in the House. I think that was my proudest moment of the last 2 years, and we need to have more of that happen.
Yeah, and I would encourage, Diana, I would encourage you to join your local Democratic Party and make it the party you want it to be.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just very straightforward. Tiffany in San Antonio, Texas. Hey, Tiffany, what's up?
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for taking my call, and thank you, Congressman, for spending your time, and thank you for your service.
Thank you,
I
Tiffany.
am an active duty officer, and quite frankly, I'm getting ready to medically retire because I already see the writing on the wall, and I can't watch young kids die anymore. I can't do it. And I think there needs to be a hearing, and there needs to be a rally cry for this hearing.
Tiffany, are you talking about the raid on Yemen? Is that what you're talking about, where that 8-year-old
yes,
American girl died?
The raid on Yemen.
And then the U.S. Navy SEAL.
Had a Navy SEAL and an 18-year-old girl die because someone took a plan off the shelf that had been previously rejected by the former administration because there wasn't enough intel. And there wasn't enough intel by the casualties that took place. You had a helo that had a hard landing that went down. You had a SEAL that died. You had an 8-year-old girl that died that was an American citizen. You also had 3 other SEALs wounded. And let me tell you something, sir. I've been around a long time, and SEALs do not go into areas for intel information to get stuff out of computers. That's not what they do. They rescue, they insert, they rescue, they get out. They insert, they kill, they get out. That is what they do.
So, Tiffany, are you suggesting that Trump took a half-baked plan and said, "Hey, I want something to make me look like a big shot. I want to have something like Obama's Bin Laden thing. Do it." And
absolutely, sir. Because here's one or two things happen. One or two things happen that cause that outcome. Because the military, we're not stupid. We look at our risk. We understand risk management. And usually when you have an outcome like that, and I was a part of a team that when I was deployed, we did assessments on accusations of civilian casualties.
Mm-hmm.
when you have an incident where there is a civilian casualty, because the American military is the most professional, the most spot on in the world, it is because of one or two things. The intel was wrong, or someone was heavy under fire and a wrong code was made, or the wrong coordinate was given, something like that. It is always a glitch somewhere.
Yeah. So you're saying this is human nature, and in this case, it was Trump's human error. Tiffany, just to cut to the chase, what's your specific question for President, or for Congressman Pocan? I keep elevating you.
When do the hearings start?
When do the hearings start? Okay, so this
is why an 8-year-old American girl was killed in a Navy SEAL.
And
when did the hearings start? We have Benghazi for 2 years.
I was just thinking about that. So, when does this become Donald Trump's Benghazi? Tiffany, thank you for the call.
Tiffany, so first of all, thank you for your service. One of the difficulties is we don't call the hearings. We're not in charge right now in Congress. So it's going to be the Republicans who are in charge of all the relevant committees in the House and the Senate. So there are other ways we can try to elevate, but we don't have that. However, I want to encourage you to stay as active as possible, because I have noticed more and more that it's voices of people in the military who are the most outspoken voices for peace across the country, because you want to do it right, because it's your lives and your friends' lives who are at stake. And we have seen it more and more. I have a couple nephews who have gone to the Middle East and come back, and quite honestly, their families were destroyed from the way we've done what we've done in the Middle East and yanking people from their homes to do this. And your voices are the single best voices on this. So the more you can, again, join with the other people that are doing that to magnify that voice through the organizations that are out there, we can explain to the American people who will trust you, because you are trustworthy because you're in the service, about these very issues. And we can do our best to try to raise issues like you're talking about. But the difficulty we are going to have in Congress, and why we have to get more creative as Democrats, is we're not in charge of any of the committees to have hearings. And if we have hearings, it doesn't mean we even get covered, because any hearing we have would be unofficial. And I just want to encourage you, please keep that voice, because it's an important voice as we move towards trying to have peace.
Denise in Chicago, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Oh, am I on?
Hey, Denise. Yes,
hey, Denise.
on the air.
Oh, hi. With respect to the congressman, thank you so much. I've been, I can't do a lot of going out to the protest, but I've been calling different senators and congressmen and expressing very strongly the resistance and the obstruction, and just getting down to some fighting. You referenced that there are a lot of things in motion and that you can't turn a ship on a dime. Well, I want to challenge that answer, because I am watching the Republican Party and Donald Trump sign over 20 executive orders within 12 days. Right. I'm seeing them tear down our democracy within minutes, and I don't know how we have to take so much time to answer that. And I'll get off the phone, and thank you so much for the time.
Denise, I think the difference, I would say, and hopefully I wasn't making an excuse for not having action, when you have the things happening as fast as they are, people are responding, but it depends whether the media covers it or not, and how many things can you respond to at any given time. I mean, I think over the weekend, because the ban on Muslims was kind of the solitary action and it got a lot of attention, it got the media's interest. But then, this week on the other ones don't get the same amount of coverage, and it's difficult. We can talk about it, but honestly, if it's not picked up, you don't know that we're talking about it in Washington. And that's the biggest frustration I have, is I can do a speech like I did for 5 minutes on the floor, but if no one covers it, no one knows that I'm calling out President Trump on his business interests, conflicts of interest, that could have been why he made the decision on what countries. And they're trying to say that it's because the prior administration put that list out. That's complete falsehood. That's in the alternative facts category, because there's a complete difference what that list was used for. And they're even saying it's only a little over 100 people are inconvenienced. No, it was hundreds of people, and thousands more are affected by that. So they're going to keep putting out misinformation. We're going to keep fighting it, but we also need a media to get that out there, which is why we're using social media, which is why we're glad that you're listening to things like Thom Hartmann, because you're getting more of this information, and why you need to work with those organizations so that as they help amplify your voice, we have the best ability to fight back. So there's a lot happening, trust me, every single day. The problem is there's a lot happening on their side too, and we're juggling it the best we can to respond.
Yeah. Congressman, we have a little less than a minute and a half left, so it wouldn't be fair to throw another caller on. Sure. Final thoughts for the week? What people can do? What you guys are doing? Anything that you want to fill in?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Just
if I could just interrupt, they just changed a vote. The congressman had a vote at 1:30. And they just changed it to 1 o'clock, and so he's going to have to leave early. So as soon as he answers this question, he's out of here, and we're going to go to a break. Anyhow.
I just keep doing what we're doing. We have to keep this energy level up. We had millions of people come out for the Women's March across the country in over 600 communities. We've got people making calls, and I'll tell you, part of why the senator from Alaska is voting against Betsy DeVos is because she got enough calls from her constituents in Alaska that it had that effect. We're winning. We're having the victories. There's a lot going on at once, and I understand people are a little overwhelmed and very frustrated, but being mad at everybody and everything isn't turning that into action, isn't organizing that energy. And I just want to encourage people in every possible way, find the groups that can help magnify your voice. Don't lose interest in this fight. Don't get discouraged and just give up. We can win. We've got people. We've got the issues. People are with us. We just have to turn it into action. And we are just your legislative arm of the resistance. But we can do this, and I really, truly believe we're going to win in the end. It's just right now, these are some really dark days, and we have to be ready for that.
My formula has always been three things, and I'd love your feedback on this. Number one, get inside the Democratic Party. If possible, volunteer to be a precinct committee person or run for office. Number two, find an outside group that's with your passion. If it's environmental, join the Sierra Club. If it's the Constitution, join MoveToAmend.org or Progressive Democrats of America, PDAmerica.org. And number three, wake up every week, at least 3 to 5 people. Tell your friends. Tell them where the progressive media is. Tell them everything. Is that?
Absolutely. And as these executive orders happen and affect more and more people, you're going to be able to broaden that audience.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Congressman Pocan has to boogie for a vote, but I'll continue taking your calls. And don't forget his website, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Thank you, sir. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Oh, thank you, Tom, for having me on, and thank you for what you do. I have two real quick things, and the first one, you were spot on about how they're playing, and I think the Trump campaign, and maybe in cohorts with the Cruz, how they set this up. This was actually a WWF good guy, bad guy wrestling setup.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, it also minimized Mike Pence and inflated Donald Trump, which is, completely consistent with Donald Trump being a narcissist and with the uncomfortable reality of the fact that most of the positions that Donald Trump has campaigned on are things that Mike Pence disagrees with.
Yeah, I mean,
so
you
they
could
set that whole thing aside.
I watched professional wrestling for years, and you could see the storyline and all this being set up as it went down, and it's like the media today, we can't figure out what happened, why this happened. Well, they were played like a fiddle.
Yep.
And my second thing, Tom, is you talked about the Civil War. There's a thing that I believe that's happened here. I'm from Iowa, and I believe that the media, the conservative media, and especially up here in the Midwest and probably the Rust Belt, the local papers, the AM radio stations have mostly conservative people on them. And I think it's amazing how they've been able to successfully move the Mason-Dixon line from where it was during the Civil War, and they've put that Mason-Dixon line at the Canadian border.
Yeah, all the way up to Wisconsin. And I don't disagree. And that was, one of the points I made yesterday is that, it used to be based, the South used to be based on slave labor, and that was really only useful in about 6 or 8 states because they could grow cotton in those states. Now it's based on the modern day analog of slave labor, and this is not to minimize slavery, which was, an insane, this is a Holocaust institution. So, modern day, let's say cheap labor is not as, it's not quite as horrific, or it's not even close to being as horrific, but it's still, now the Republican Party is promoting cheap labor, but it doesn't depend on the ability to grow cotton. You can have cheap labor, anywhere in the country. So if you can just convince the people of the state to vote against their best interest and make the state go right to work for less, for example, as Scott Walker did, and then you're in Fat City.
Yeah, well, it's amazing the hatred that's for Hillary here in the Midwest and northern Iowa, where I come from, and it's just completely amazing where that's come from. And I don't know, we've had a lot of people, because there's down in Arkansas and the southern states, there's not a lot of work, so we've had a lot of people come up here, and mostly white middle-aged men, and there's just this rampant hatred. I mean, it's kind of scary, you don't even like to say anything. And these people are dead serious about how much they hate, and, it's just completely scary.
Yeah, it is. Don't ever underestimate. Michael Moore, I guess on Bill Maher's show, said, he thinks Trump is going to win. I think that there's a possibility, and it scares the hell out of me, and it should scare the hell out of all of us. And I agree with Michael Moore that we need to get out of the bubble and take this stuff seriously. Jeff, thank you for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The Trump administration is easing the sanctions on Russia. What a surprise. Andrea in Mariposa, California. Hey, Andrea, excuse me. You're on the air. What's on your mind? I'm sorry, Congressman Pocan is no longer here, but I hope I can answer your question.
Yeah, I wanted to know about the pipeline, and why isn't the media covering that?
Because the media is owned by a bunch of big corporations, and Dakota Access or Trans, whatever the company is that owns the pipeline. They're thick as thieves. These guys. Why didn't the media cover? Congressman Pocan this morning did a speech on the floor where he had a giant map showing the countries where Donald Trump's business interests are versus the countries that were banning from the Muslims. And did the media even discuss it? No, not one word. There was an article yesterday, I think it was in Mediaite. I'm going to track it down during the break here and talk about it in the next hour, that in the last 15 months, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox all have seen their revenues increase from 40 to 90%. I mean, just massive increases in revenue. And it's fairly clear that what happened was a year and a half ago, the guys who programmed these networks, just like Les Moonves admitted this about CBS. They said, what's going to make us the most money? What's best for democracy? A good debate about the issues, or the Donald Trump reality show. Donald Trump is a reality TV star. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars for NBC. Let's have him make some money for us. And so they ran the Donald Trump reality show for a year and a half throughout the Republican primary and then throughout the general election, and gave us President Trump. They gave him $2 billion worth of free publicity. And they're doing the same thing right now.
That's all it was. And is it, did I read his health care right? They're going to take away the natives, our native health care?
I had not heard that, Andrea, but if that's the case, geez, it's just like one thing after another. This is shock and awe. These guys are dumping, the entire conservative grab bag of how to bring down a republic and turn it over to fascist hands as fast as they can. Andrea, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader, which is excerpts from other books that I've written. This excerpt is from Threshold. And it starts out, we're on page 239. It starts out with, I went to Corral, Peru. It's a town that, or the first mother city, the first original city that has ever been discovered intact. It's 5,000 years old. It has been buried for 4,000 years. It was just excavated in the last decade. I went down to Peru. We did our radio show from there. And I met with Dr. Ruth Shady, who is the anthropologist and archaeologist who's running this. And she said, well, as we sat and ate, I asked her what was the most significant fact about Corral. Here, she said, the civilization was different, contrasting the Corral of 5,000 years ago with the city-states that were emerging in Egypt, India, and Asia at that time. The focus of the culture here was different. When this civilization was formed here, peace was very important. There was no war. She paused and looked at me with a glint in her eye. Why? Why was there no war? She asked as if quizzing me. It turns out they found this city that had been there for 1,000 years, and there wasn't a single instrument of war or violence anywhere in the city. Music, dancing, flutes, amphitheaters, no war. So then we jump to page 244. Are we innately evil or good, warlike or peaceful? In 1634, in his book Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes stated our culture's assumption of the essentially evil nature of humans, saying that life without the iron fist of church or state would be war of every man against every man, resulting in a society where life is poor, nasty, brutish, and short. A generation later, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke challenged Hobbes, suggesting that evidence from tribes being discovered across Africa and the Americas by European explorers demonstrated that instead, the natural state of humankind was good, egalitarian, and peaceful. The thinking of Rousseau and Locke explicitly and overtly influenced the founders of the United States, particularly Thomas Jefferson, who saw verification in it in his own contact with Native Americans. Thus began America as an egalitarian experiment, an experiment that has been expanded and developed by nearly 100 other nations in the world that claim democracy, particularly the countries of Northern Europe, where once feared and warlike people, most notably the Vikings of Norway and Sweden, are now among the happiest and most peaceful and self-sufficient people in the world. Yet the Hobbeses of the world are currently ascendant in terms of both war on humans and war on the environment. But what should be done? As I said in Leonardo DiCaprio's environmental documentary, The 11th Hour, the problem is not a problem of technology. The problem is not a problem of too much carbon dioxide. The problem is not a problem of global warming. The problem is not a problem of waste. All of those things are symptoms of the problem. The problem is the way that we are thinking. The problem is fundamentally a cultural problem. It's at the level of our culture that this illness is happening. In my books, I've shared stories from all around the world of cultures that have matured, awakened, and found ways to live in peace, harmony, and ecological balance, and the fate of others that have not. Some are pre-city, Aboriginal, and tribal people. Some are modern communities. Some are fully developed city-states moving quickly in the direction of peace. All offer us a new vision of how life can be in a world where the core assumptions of modern culture are challenged and modified. This is not a radical or new age or easily dismissed concept. It started with the Enlightenment of the 17th century. Its first experiment was the founding of the United States in the 18th century.
flawed but a great experiment. It flowered throughout the world throughout the 19th century as nation after nation flipped from warrior king states to democracies. It found global acceptance in the 20th century with the foundation of the United Nations, the first international organization whose single explicit purpose was to create, promote, and maintain worldwide peace. And now in the 21st century, as war against both humans and against nature is increasingly being viewed with horror by people around the world, movements are springing up all over the planet to reject the immature cultural paradigms of the past and move us into a post-carbon, post-warfare, egalitarian, and peaceful world where there's room for both humans and for all other life. Then we start a chapter, why and when did war begin? If it's true, as scientists from Peter Farb to Rianne Eisler to Ruth Shady point out, that a prime differentiator between war societies and peaceful societies is the role of power relationships between men and women, the question is raised, why and when does war begin, and how is it related to the relationship between the sexes? Most pre-literate cultures, from those in the Arctic to those in the southernmost tips of South America and Africa, were largely peaceful before contact with technology and our culture. While there was conflict, and often violent conflict, it rarely reached the proportions of organized, sustained, legally sanctioned mass murder that we today refer to as war. As the anthropologist Peter Farb has documented, some Native American societies, for example, the Shoshone, didn't even have a word for war in their vocabulary. Others used organized games to resolve conflicts. Many theories have been put forward for how and why the warrior mentality took over. And then, it goes on to whether this started with animal husbandry or whether it started with agriculture, or where did war begin, and some interesting stuff. So it's in the Thom Hartmann Reader.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Oh, welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Sometimes takes a second. So Donald Trump is threatening funding of UC Berkeley if they don't, quote, allow free speech. And the allow free speech is letting, what was his name? Milo Yiannopoulos or whatever his name is. This right-winger who writes for Breitbart, basically, was supposed to speak there yesterday. And a bunch of students got so angry that they burned some trash out on the street. They were seriously upset. So Trump says, okay, we're going to cut your federal funds. This guy thinks he's emperor. For a half a day, I floated the idea of calling him King Donald. People are starting actually to refer to him now as Mad King Donald. In fact, I know at least one European who does that. So that's amazing. Somebody, Politically Mathy tweets, what's that evolution thing with the dinosaur on my bookshelf? That was behind Congressman Pocan. It's called Evolution: The Beginning, and it's a game from North Star Games. The company advertised with us before Christmas, and it's a cool game for teaching evolution to kids, and it's available in Target stores. So that's what it is. Somebody, I just saw a note from somebody asking. They no longer advertise with us, but it's still a great company, and they're doing great stuff. Something very bizarre. I saw just two very bizarre videos yesterday. One was from the Louisville Courier Examiner, I think is the name of the newspaper, and the other was from somebody who's affiliated with the Indivisible Kentucky, right? IndivisiBleKY.org, I think is the website, IndivisiBleKY.org. And it is a military convoy, and maybe, Chris, you can just run this as B-roll while I talk over it. It's a military convoy with a Trump sign on it going down the freeway in Kentucky. And, it's like, what the heck is going on with this? These are Humvees. These are military Humvees. There's about 8 or 10 of them in a row. They're traveling in classic military, order. And they don't have no license plates. They have no markings. This is not official military, and it's not officially the state. And yet the lead Humvee has this giant sign. It's the size of a flag.
that in giant letters, in 1.5 foot tall letters, says Trump on it. And it's like, what the hell is this? And then, I first saw this, and then I remembered that, Trump has his own private security detail in addition to the Secret Service. He's the first president to do this. And I've read several news reports that he hired Eric Prince, Betsy DeVos's brother, Eric Prince, the guy who started Blackwater, to create this private security detail for himself. And is this the militia? Are these the brown shirts? Is this Trump's private security detail? Is this Blackwater? Is this more organized than, the brown shirts in the early Nazi days were a volunteer force, but they were organized by the Nazis. I don't know if they had the equivalent of Eric Prince and a company associated with them. There must have been some flow of money through there, because some of the brown shirts were getting stipends, and some of them were getting ultimately uniforms and things. But what the hell is going on here? Have any of you seen anything like this anywhere, where a military convoy is going down the road, no license plates, no markings, all Humvees? These are like small tanks, only with wheels instead of the tracks that the tanks have. These are Humvees, and military issued, and has the revolution begun? And it's not what we thought. It's just incredible what's going on here. Anyhow, Tim in Middleburg, New York. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Just the way you described what happened yesterday at Berkeley is burning a little trash. Didn't you see the video of what happened out there? It was a little more than that.
Yeah, the students were seriously upset.
Yeah, they're beating up people with sticks. People wearing hoods and masks.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, if somebody was beating somebody with a stick.
Why wasn't anybody arrested for that? Why were they allowed to do that and not be arrested? They beat a guy till he was practically dead.
Okay, Tim, I did not see that part of it, and if that's the case, then I absolutely would condemn anybody who's beating anybody. But that said, I don't think it's the role of the President of the United States to say, we're going to take away your education dollars. You're right. If somebody's committing a crime and beating somebody, assault is a crime, they should be arrested. It's really that simple. Pam in Easton, Pennsylvania. Hey, Pam, what's on your mind?
Yes, I'm an immigrant, and I want to talk about the travel ban.
Sure.
And I've been in this country for about 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an American citizen. I came to this country as a student. I was very privileged to get a scholarship, do my studies here, get a job. I love this country, everything about it. And I did work in the corporate field. Everything is fine. And I have nothing against this country. I simply love it. But the policies are absolutely screwed up. I'm sorry to use this word.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right, Pam. And this is Donald Trump pandering to his hyper-racist base.
Yes.
It's nothing more than that.
This was never, I never saw this before. Yes, there was, slight discrimination here and there, but I never paid much attention to it, and I never faced it. I came from India. I had my education. I really didn't bother with all that. But now I'm ready to go to India for a vacation. Not really a vacation. I have to take care of my late parents' stuff. Okay, I'm ready to go. My son comes up to me and says he doesn't know anything about the travel ban. He just has heard something in school. He comes up and tells me, "Mommy, will you be able to come back?"
Wow. Well, the simple answer, Pam, is you will definitely be able to come back. The Prime Minister of India right now is sort of a variation, the Indian version of Donald Trump. So I doubt they're going to be on our bad list any day soon. But so you basically, as an immigrant, you're empathizing with these other immigrants, right?
I'm talking about a child.
Yeah.
And a child, I have neighbors, some of my neighbors, some from the Middle East and all that. Everybody is absolutely very hardworking. And I'm telling you, I have been vetted more times as an immigrant before getting my green card and, of course, my citizenship. And people should be aware of this, all the people who are born and brought up here,
Right.
that we are vetted 5 times more than everybody else.
Yeah, and this is the big lie that Donald Trump is trying to promote on Fox so-called news and right-wing hate radio, is that, Obama wasn't vetting anybody. I'm sorry, it was at least a 2-year process. Pam, thank you so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Pam really nailed it. We'll be back with more of your calls after this. And welcome back. Linda in Bamberg, South Carolina. I used to live just down the street from Bamberg, Germany. Sister cities, Linda?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I really don't think so, Tom. Okay, I'm
what's
a
up?
long-time viewer, Tom, on Free Speech TV, and it's my first time calling you.
Well, thank you, Linda.
I'm calling because I've decided that I'm going to try and do my share. And so you call your representatives, you call your senator's office, and you get a message that says that their voice box is full and their voicemail is full, and they call back another time. You call back another time, and you get the exact same thing. What do we do now?
Right. Have you tried calling the local offices in South Carolina?
Really, I haven't, because they close you out really fast.
Yeah.
They have ways. Okay, well, we're so and so is at lunch, or we have to do this, and we'll talk to you at another time. So please
well, Congressman Pocan's point was well taken, though. I mean, even the people who know that you disagree with them and they disagree with you, they are still measuring public opinion. And while the people answering the phones are typically, if you're calling a Republican member of Congress, they typically hire right-wing ideologues to work for them, and they may not be the most friendly when you call. They are still writing down the fact that you called and objected to Tom Price's nomination, or whatever it may be, whatever the issue is. And that's why I say, please call the local office if possible. It'll always have more impact if a local phone number calls the local office, and they all have caller ID. They know where you're calling from. So call the local office and very respectfully and very briefly say, I'm calling about this issue. I want the congressman to know that and then here's my position. Without, lots of embellishments and explanations, because the fact of the matter is basically they have an issue sheet there, yes or no, protect our streams, yes or no, that kind of thing.
Right.
And but that's step one. And then step two, Linda, is, find groups, as a congressman said, find groups working on the ground in your area, whether it's a local church that's active, whether it's a local political club that's active, whether it's the Democratic Party, whether it's the local chapter of the Sierra Club or Progressive Democrats of America, or whatever it may be that is concerned about issues that you're concerned about on the progressive side, where you really will be meeting people of like mind and passion, and throw yourself into it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you even have to go to meetings. A lot of this stuff happens online. A lot of it happens with, weekly phone calls or monthly phone calls. There are lots and lots of things to do. Does that make sense?
Yes, it certainly does. I only have one other thing to say to you.
Mm-hmm.
The clip that I saw just now on your program with the Humvees, that scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, isn't that bizarre? I mean, it's like, what is going on with this? That was, in Kentucky, and it looked like they were heading toward Fort Knox, but which is an Army base. But, they didn't have the Army markings, and they didn't even have license plates. And they're not flying the U.S. flag. They're flying a flag that says Trump. And it's like, what the hell is this? It's forgive my French, but there's something going on right now in this country. I realize I'm starting to sound like Alex Jones here, and it makes me a little uncomfortable. But there's something going on that we don't know about, that we should know about. And I suspect that video, and there's multiple videos, by the way, of that group going down the highway. This is not something that was, somebody did using the video version of Photoshop. And nobody knows. Everybody's trying to figure it out. Linda, thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Okay, I have been teasing this all week. I keep meaning to get to this story, and I'm going to do it now. This is The Guardian on the 30th of January, Monday of this week, I guess that would be. The Guardian published an article titled Joseph Goebbels' secretary, Brumhilde Hamsel, dies aged 106. Right, and it says, and the subhead is, one of the last people close to the Nazi leadership was the subject of a film last year, but felt no sense of guilt for Hitler's crimes. And she died in her sleep in Munich Friday night, says the director and producer of a documentary about her life. She spent 3 years working for Hitler's close confidant right up until his death on May 1st, 1945, by suicide, I would add, when Goebbels and his wife Magda poisoned their 6 children before killing themselves. She accompanied Goebbels into Hitler's bunker in the dying days. Remembers being dumbstruck on hearing the news that they were losing the war. She said, "This is the documentary is called A German Life. It's in German. It's opening in well, actually, maybe it's not. It's opening in British cinemas later this year." She says, "I will never forgive Goebbels for what he did to the world or for the fact that he murdered his innocent children." But that's about the closest she got to expressing regret for her role in the Nazi death machine. She says, really, I didn't do anything other than type in Goebbels' office. But when people talk about resisting, this is an amazing quote. And excuse me, I'm sneezing. Pardon me. She insisted that she had simply acted like most Germans by not resisting the regime. And then this is what she told The Guardian in her last interview. This was last year. She said, those people nowadays who said they would have stood up against the Nazis, I believe that they are sincere in meaning that, but believe me, most of them would not have. She said the whole country was under as if a kind of spell. I could open myself up to the accusations that I wasn't interested in politics, but the truth is the idealism of youth might easily have led you to having your neck broken. This is, you know, here she just died at the age of 106. The old saying, it's been attributed to numerous people, but the old saying that when the last man or person, I mean, you know, this is, like I said, it's an old saying, so it's sexist, of course, but when the last man who remembers the horrors of the last great war dies, the next great war becomes inevitable. It's usually attributed to Alfred Toynbee. And, you know, basically, I think there's a very literal truth there, that we repeat the mistakes of history when the people who lived through the mistakes of history are no longer around, when they've all died off. And there's pretty much no one alive who was of, you know, kind of conscious age, who was over, say, 12 or 13 years old at the time of the Holocaust, at the time of, you know, I mean, there are some people around who were born in the early 30s, but you know, very few, and they're going fast. And so, are we preparing to make those same mistakes again? And is, God forbid, America making the mistakes that Germany made, or at the very least, the mistakes that Italy made by elevating Mussolini? This is, it's an amazing story. And she told us about the love of her life, Gottfried Kierbach, who was Jewish, with whom she planned to escape Germany and live forever, or to escape Germany forever. He went to Amsterdam to arrange for a new life. She visited him there until she told him she was endangering her life because of her frequent visits. It was coming to the authorities of the Nazis, or the attention of the Nazis. She never saw him again. A doctor advised her to abort the child of theirs she was carrying because she had a serious lung complaint and she might have died. She said even toward the end of her life, she expressed no guilt, except towards people she said should have been taken better care of. One of those was her best friend, Eva Löwenthal, a vivacious red-haired Jewish girl. Only in 2005 did she inquire about her friend's fate, discovering that she had been murdered in Auschwitz. Amazing. But this is like, you know, Milton Mayer's book. When he went over to Germany in 1945 and met with these, you know, had these long interviews with these 10 Germans who had nothing to do with the military machine, Nothing to do with the political machine. A baker, a bricklayer, a college professor, a couple of other professions, but they all just continued to work all through the war and just do what they did. And he was like, how could you have been a part of that? And the unanimous answer from all of them was, you don't understand. You don't understand what happens when they take over. I mean, one of the college professor, he was like, we were being governed by continuous shock. Every day there was a new outrage. And you think that you're going to, that everybody's going to rise up for this one, and they don't. And so then the next one happens and nobody rises, and you keep waiting for the big one and it never comes. Well, the difference between us now and Germany then is that the big one came on January 20th with the installation of Donald Trump in the White House here in Washington, D.C. And on the day after the largest demonstration worldwide, arguably in the history of the world for anything, which was the Women's March. But I would say it went way beyond that. And now we see groups like OurRevolution.com and IndivisibleReport.org, I think it is, just absolutely going viral, groups showing up all over the country, protesting, being out there. And the difference between this movement and the original Tea Party is that the Tea Party was an AstroTurf thing. You know, when that guy on CNBC said, we need a Tea Party, right? He was set up to do that, or he said, it was they knew that was coming. The original Tea Party was actually created in the 1980s by the tobacco industry. They trademarked the name Tea Party, and they created this organization, and it ran for a year, and it was called the American Tea Party. And the thing was, we're sick and tired of government regulations on smoking. This was funded by the tobacco industry. So, when the tobacco industry started losing in the 90s, and, they just basically gave up on the whole Tea Party thing. And so the Koch network and their buddies, they revived the Tea Party. I don't know if they bought the trademark from the tobacco industry or what, but we got this new Tea Party, and they were renting these and painting even. This is not cheap. These buses are $300,000 a piece. I don't know what they rent for, and I don't know what it costs to paint them, but it's not inconsequential. And here in Washington, D.C., during the height of the Tea Party, they were bussing in people constantly for demonstrations. And pretty much anywhere in the country, 100 people, 50 people showed up and said it was a Tea Party. They had these real high-priced PR firms here in Washington, D.C. that would push it out to the national media, make sure that there were cameras there. Every Tea Party event, or not every, but many Tea Party events were televised. They got millions of dollars of free publicity. That's the one piece of the equation that is missing from all the protests right now. Did you know? I didn't know this until last night. I saw it on TV, but the day before yesterday, I didn't know that over all this week there have been protests shutting down universities. There have been protests at at the offices of members of congressmen and congresswomen's offices all over the country, principally in front of Republican offices. Although the one thing I think everybody knows is Chuck Schumer, his house has been occupied for a couple of days. People saying resist everything. Well, what's interesting is that, this movement is actually physically much larger than the Tea Party, has a higher approval rating than the Tea Party, because it's actually a grassroots movement. It's not something that's funded by the Koch network and Americans for Prosperity or Freedom Works, one of the Koch brothers' front groups. This is real. So, get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And none of us ever at the age of 106 have to say, well, do I have regrets about what happened? If you define ISIS as a group of Wahhabist, Salafite militants who subscribe to the Wahhabist strain of Sunni Islam that has been promoted aggressively since the 1930s by the government of Saudi Arabia, where they're exporting it all over the country. They're funding madrasas all over the country. They teach the Jews literally eat and drink the blood of Muslim children. They talk about the importance of killing and destroying Israelis and that sort of thing, and Jews all over the world. if you're and this call to jihad and a greater Muslim world, et cetera, if that's how you're defining ISIS, they've been around forever. Or not forever, at least my entire lifetime. If you're defining ISIS as the group that calls itself the Islamic State, they emerged explicitly around 2004, 2005, largely in Iraq, after the George W. Bush administration went in. And keep in mind, there was not one single al-Qaeda person in Iraq when we invaded Iraq. But because Paul Bremer and Donald Rumsfeld principally, and Cheney and Bush apparently, but apparently this was Bremer and Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz, this group of libertarians, and they believed that if you got government out of the way, you would have a wonderful society. And more than half of the GDP of Iraq was government-owned industries. You had government-owned, tire factories, government-owned steel factories, government-owned cement factories, government-owned businesses. And you had to be a member of the Ba'ath Party in order to get a job, which was the non-secular, non-religious socialist party that Saddam Hussein ran. And so just a couple of weeks into the war, after the war was successful, after we took down, because the war only lasted a couple of weeks, and then the occupation began. And when the occupation began, Bush sent L. Paul Bremer over to Iraq, and they shut down all of these government-owned businesses, fired everybody. They shut down the Iraqi army, which was 500,000 men, and it was the largest employer in Iraq. And you had to be, again, a Ba'athist Party member to be in the army. They shut that down, and they did something called de-Ba'athification. In other words, they said, if you're a Ba'ath Party member, which was all Sunnis, and which ran from the intelligentsia and the professional military, people working in hospitals, all the way down to the street sweepers. If you're a Ba'ath Party member or ever have been, you may not be employed again. And so, and we're shutting down these government industries, or you may not come back into the Iraqi army. And so the consequence of this was you had millions of men, young men, who were suddenly unemployed, who had weapons abound, and were seriously PO'd. And they cut all the government programs. Saddam Hussein had a program that was similar to our Social Security that took care of people in old age. And it was a fairly generous program. We did away with that. Saddam had a program that was the equivalent of food stamps, the subsidized food for people of low income. We did away with that. Saddam had a program of national health care. We did away with that. Saddam had a program of free public education, including college. We did away with that. And the theory was, when we did away with all of this stuff, that now Iraq is a clean slate and the libertarian experiment can proceed, and government and corporations and billionaires from all over the world are going to flood into Iraq, or indigenous Iraqis will emerge who will create a flourishing new economy, and we will prove that libertarian ideology is right. And instead what happened was chaos. And out of that chaos came al-Qaeda. And then out of the al-Qaeda group, al-Qaeda came in, but a lot of these Sunnis just said, okay, screw that. I'm with al-Qaeda now because I'm no longer with Saddam Hussein, or I just no longer have a job. And then al-Qaeda, you had these internal divisions in al-Qaeda, and one of them was Anbar al-Awlaki, as I recall. And he started what became ISIL, the Islamic State in the Levant, or the Islamic State originally it was called the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. And that was in 2005, with the explicit name. In 2006, they started becoming a real force. And by 2008, they had a presence in 4 countries. So, and this was all before Obama came along. So, Trump and the Republicans are engaging in some radical revisionist history. There would be no ISIL unless if George W. Bush had not lied us into the war in Iraq. It's just that simple. George W. Bush created ISIS.
Wouldn't that be considered war crimes? I mean, when you think about all the stuff that he did, what you just described, and then all the men and women that were killed from our country, plus all the men and women that were killed from their country, and then all the veterans that you were talking about not too long ago, how many are killing themselves because of what's been going on now in Afghanistan, and it's all related. To me, George W. Bush is a war criminal. I mean, they're still looking for 90-year-old Nazis which they should. Well, why are we letting George W. and all his cohorts get away with what they got away with?
Well, the answer to that question is a whole nother rant, but we are letting them get away with it. And Vince Bugliosi, who just died a few months ago, wrote a brilliant book called The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder, which was turned into a movie. I recommend them both to you, Laura. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. This is absolutely bizarre. I raised a couple of issues. Number one, somebody called in and said, oh my God, did you see the rioters at the University of California, Berkeley? They were setting things on fire and beating people up. And I said, then they should be arrested. They should have been. The University of California at Berkeley is saying these were not students who did this. These were outside agitators. And let's keep in mind, this guy writes for Breitbart. And Breitbart is constantly pointing out what they consider to be false flag operations. And you have to wonder, was the riot a false flag operation? You know, I've told this story a million times. I remember being back, in SDS in the late 60s, and the guys who were always yelling the loudest about they wanted violence, we discovered a decade and a half later when we finally sued and got the state police files released, were actually infiltrators. They were police officers who had infiltrated SDS, and they were calling for violence. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes, heard it with my own ears. And so the question is, who was doing the rioting at UC Berkeley? And according to UC Berkeley, who would know, it was not students. It was not the people who were protesting. There was a peaceful protest, and then some people showed up and got violent for the cameras, and which worked out tremendously to the benefit of Fox so-called news, authoritarians in the Trump administration, and Breitbart. So who benefited from that? Breitbart, Trump, and Fox News. So who was probably responsible for that? I leave that up to you. Meanwhile, I talked about this, these Humvees driving through Kentucky, flying a Trump flag, and the pictures are all over the internet now. A group of 8 Humvees was spotted Sunday by several of the drivers and their passengers who recorded the vehicles as they traveled north on Interstate 65. Large blue Trump flag drew attention. It was mounted to one of the vehicles. This from Kentucky.com, which is the local newspaper. The Herald Leader is the newspaper. And it turns out that the Humvee, the vehicles were part of an East Coast-based Naval Special Warfare Unit. That's the fancy name for the Navy SEALs. And they were being driven between 2 training sites, according to ABC News and the Courier-Journal. It's unclear whether actual SEALs or whether the SEAL support staff were at the wheel, but in any case, this is against the law. If this was our active duty military flying a giant Trump flag on their vehicles, it's against the law, and it's outrageous. Tony in San Gregorio, California. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind? Tony?
Hey. Sorry, Berkeley?
Yeah.
I'm in Berkeley. I actually was at the protest yesterday, and I
in
walked
Berkeley.
Through casually. Yeah, on the way home from work, I kind of I live 5 minutes from where the protests were, and I observed kind of just all the people. The vast majority of people, I would say, were completely peaceful. A lot were students. I mean, this is in front of the main section of campus, and where it meets like the eating areas and whatnot. And everyone was peacefully protesting. I would say there were, first off, a lot of people there. And I think there were probably a handful of people who are wearing like black ski masks and kind of are exactly how you phrased it, adjutants. And at one point I observed, just while I'm walking, a man kind of running after another man and screaming kind of, don't bring a knife back in here. And the guy who had been running out with the so-called knife was a pro-Milo, pro-Trump supporter. So I think it's really easy to slander, anyone who doesn't allow, a pro-Milo or Trump speaker as, interrupting freedom of speech. But I think the vast majority of people just want equality, peacefulness, and are trying to stand up for their rights.
Yeah, I agree. And I have no problem with people protesting somebody whose speech may even be offensive. I do have a problem if the university invited him to speak, or if a student group invited him to speak, or whatever, with him being prevented from speaking.
Yeah, and I think it's just a little bit scary when we start to kind of like generalize based on the actions of a few individuals. We're talking about like 10,000 people, and 5 might be doing bad things.
Yeah, and we saw the same thing. I mean, we watched from the windows of our studio here in Washington, D.C., as what looked to me like maybe a dozen or so guys in black masks were running down L Street, and a block down the street on 13th, they were smashing the windows of the Starbucks there and the Bank of America. And, they got caught up with about 200 people, and they're all being charged with 10 years in prison felony riot right now, including initially 6 reporters. Now it's down to, I think, 1 or 2. And this, these felony riot charges, this is serious stuff. On the other hand, smashing the windows of a business is serious stuff. But it seems like there's a middle ground, and I'm hoping the judiciary will find that. But the crackdown on protest, or keep in mind when the Reichstag Gebäude, when the Parliament building in Berlin was burned, that was the event that led to Hitler's rise to power. Basically, he had just either days before or days after he was made chancellor by as I recall, von Papen or Hindenburg, whichever one had the power to make him chancellor. And I write about this in my book, We the People. And Hitler, when he heard that the Reichstag was on fire, and apparently knew that it was going to happen, there was just a few blocks away. He was having lunch with von Papen. He walked over to the Reichstag, and in front of the burning building, got in front of a microphone and said, "This is a sign from God that Germany needs to be united against the communists and the other treasonous elements in our society who would seek to destroy Germany." And that was his entrance, his grand entrance as a statesman onto the political stage of Germany. And it turns out that the guy who did the torching of the Reichstag, Marius van der Lubbe was his name. He was a Dutch man. He was mentally ill. He was schizophrenic, and probably also mentally retarded. Fairly low IQ. And there's a pretty good body of evidence now that it was the Nazis who actually smuggled him through a basement corridor from one building into the Reichstag, and helped him set on fire all these old, what do they call those giant woven things that look like rugs? Tapestries. Thank you, Chris. Set on fire these tapestries that lined the walls of the Reichstag. And in order, basically the Nazis set this fire so that they could claim that Germany was under siege. And, when the Reichstag was burned. And, we can't forget these lessons. We just can't forget these lessons. Tony, thank you for your call. Tim in Lake Havasu, Arizona. Hey, Tim, what's on your mind?
How are you, Tom?
Good. What's up?
I called to talk about what you're just talking about, so I guess I'll expand on it. As a progressive, since the disaster that was Ronald Reagan, we really haven't had a choice except fascist light or fascist dark. And I think progressives believe we've moved into the fascist darkest. That having been known, we need ways to communicate that aren't being monitored by big government. Now, I heard you tell the previous caller how to access local organizations, but perhaps it's moved beyond that. Perhaps, you're kind of an informational clearinghouse, but what do fascist dark do when they take over countries? They
shut down the press.
Quiet and eliminate any competition.
Yeah.
And if we're really on the brink,
well, I would say to a large extent,
we need to mobilize in a way that I wouldn't understand how.
Tim, if you define fascism the way that Vice President Henry Wallace did in 1945 in the New York Times, or if you define it, or in 44 in the New York Times, or if you define it the way that what is attributed anyway to Mussolini, it was actually Giovanni Gentile, his kind of right-hand man, is Steve Bannon who wrote it, but that fascism is the merger of corporate and state interests. And if you look at it through that lens, the media in the United States has been pretty much singing the right-wing song ever since they consolidated in the 90s after the Telecommunications Act was signed. Ever since the ownership rules were blown up, and there's just this dearth of independent media in the United States now, a real shortage of it. And so I think, you know, given that there's literally not a town in America where you can't get right-wing hate radio, but there's only a couple of dozen towns in America where you can get progressive radio, for example. And again, progressive.
I live in Arizona.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel so alone.
Yeah, and well, then there actually is a progressive station in Phoenix, but that's it, and it's so arguably they've already taken over the media. You know, you know, but you know, where do we go from here? I don't know. This is a tough one. This is. You know, and as that college professor told Milton Mayer, you know, you tell your friends and they say, oh, you're being an alarmist, but maybe you are an alarmist, and they say, oh, you're not right. Well, maybe you are right, but maybe you're not. And so it's really hard to know, and that's that uncertainty is one of the things that they prey on, that they use. Tim, thank you for the call. We'll be back 14 minutes before the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're going to check in with Talk Media News in a few minutes, and we'll be taking your calls. Stick around. And welcome back. John in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Yeah, Tom, the protesting is free speech. We got the free speech that buys a politician, you know, the Citizens United. Free speech. Why ain't these judges after this stuff? They blame it like they're charging the unions $1,000 and the union $10,000 fine. And that one where you can run over a protester in South Dakota as long as it's nice. Where is these judges on this stuff?
Right. Well, the run over a protester and kill him as long as it is, quote, accidental, that has not yet been made into law. And once it's made into law, if somebody does it, it'll be tested in the courts. And maybe it'll even be challenged in the courts before, you know, after it's made into law. But you can't challenge something before it's law. But North Dakota's owned, you know, the government of North Dakota is owned by the Republican Party, so it probably will be made into law. These fines of $1,000 for union members who engage in pickets, and $10,000 a day for the union who is sponsoring the picket. These are clear, in my opinion, clear violations of the National Labor Relations Act and attempts to stifle dissent in the United States. The laws in some states that say that anybody who interferes with commerce, in other words, standing in front of a store with a protest sign, is guilty of economic terrorism and subject to the anti-terror laws of the states. These are you want fascism of the hyper-authoritarian variety. All of these laws fall into that category, and the Republicans are just, you know, lining up for this stuff. And you've got 6 states now that are considering these laws. And
you know, another thing that gets me is like these kids are like 5-year-olds fighting like like the filibuster and the nuke thing. You know, for this judge, I mean, this is so childish. You know what I'm saying? They need to fix the problem. Get on the ball and fix the problems.
Yeah, well, the problem is that, you know, the Republican strategy for years and years and years, and Naomi Klein laid this out in her book, The Shock Doctrine, the Republican strategy is to break government. For example, they have been, you know, over the last 2 decades, they've been steadily and slowly defunding the Internal Revenue Service and the Social Security Administration. So now when you call the IRS or you call about Social Security, you're going to be on hold longer. And they, there's a hiring freeze. And so you're more likely, in fact, a friend of mine, one of my neighbors works at FEMA, and they were in the process, they've had 4 people retire in the last year, and they were hiring 4 people, and in his little group of 6 people. And he's like doing the work of 5 people. I mean, it's just, it's mind-boggling. And he said, God forbid we have a disaster, because, we're the disaster response crew. And so Republicans try to break government so that they can stand there and say, hey, look, it's broken, it's not working. We should privatize this to one of our buddies who will kick back the money and campaign contributions to us. They've done this with the military. They've done this with our intelligence services. About 1/3 of the military budget, about half of our intelligence budget is now going to private for-profit corporations, who then kick back millions and millions of dollars, arguably hundreds of millions of dollars a year, in basically bribes, where they call them campaign contributions, and lobbying efforts to members of Congress. And that's something we need to break. This is what Congressman Pocan was talking about when he said, we need to get money out of politics and provide for basically taxpayer-funded elections. Anyhow, John, thank you for the call. I'm with you. These are big issues. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and free-don.org. And on the line with us, Victoria Jones. Hey, Victoria. Oh, what's happening in the world?
Hey, Tom. Well, quite a lot's happening, actually. I'm at the White House right now. I've just come from a remarkably brief White House briefing because Press Secretary Sean Spicer wanted to be sure that everybody could go and see the president having his meeting with Harley Davidson. And so it was kept brief. But U.S. ties with ally Australia have been a bit strained today after reports of an acrimonious phone call between President Trump and Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. And then Donald Trump tweeted last night that a deal between the two nations on refugees was dumb. Now, you may have or may not have been talking about this call, but
I have not.
Well, what basically seems to have happened is that it was an hour-long call planned, turned into 25 minutes. Now, it depends who you listen to, whether you listen to the media, dishonest media, or whether you listen to the now walk back from Turnbull, whose office, according to Australian media, was earlier saying that Trump yelled and did, in fact, hang up at the end of 25 minutes. Now we're being told that it was a cordial ending of the call and that he did not hang up. But earlier, the media were reporting that he did yell and tried to bully, but that Turnbull would not be bullied. Knowing a bit about Australian politics, I can tell you that Turnbull won't be bullied. Anyway, that Trump said it was a lousy deal on refugees, and this is refugees who are being held in detention centers on an island off of Australia. The Obama administration made a deal that the U.S. would take 1,250 of them. Some of them come from Iran, Iraq, Sudan, and Somalia, and Donald Trump does not want to take any of them. He's been known to say, according to the Post, I don't want these people here.
Right, and he keeps exaggerating the numbers. He keeps saying it's over 2,000.
Right, and it's not.
Right.
But now Spicer said in the briefing today that he's basically apparently going to honor the deal, but they're going to be subject to extreme vetting. But that
we already have been.
Exactly. But that it's a lousy deal, and but nevertheless, this is not a good situation. However, I can tell you that Turnbull's ratings have gone up in Australia.
Oh, good. So Theresa May comes over here, holds hands with Donald Trump, and makes nice with him. She goes back to the UK, and she is characterized as Neville Chamberlain.
A poodle.
Yeah, there you go. Which was the way they described Tony Blair relative to George W. Bush, and whereas Turnbull basically says, Mr. Trump, we have a deal. You're going to honor this deal, and whether you like it or not. And Trump freaks out and hangs up on him. And Turnbull is now the hero in Australia. That says something about the perception of our president around the world, does it not?
Yes, it's very interesting. Now, Trump had another phone. He has had a number of phone calls. Had a phone call with the president of Mexico, which also apparently did not go well. When Trump told him that you've got some bad hombres down there, said your military is afraid of them, our military is not, and maybe we should send our military down there to take care of them.
Now, is that a threat to invade, an adjacent country? Is he going to, I mean, I remember reading in Walt Whitman's biography of Abraham Lincoln, reading Lincoln's, really, really angry letters and speeches about Polk when he started the Mexican-American War. Lincoln was totally opposed to it. I think it was, 1841 or something like that. And Lincoln was in the State House in Illinois at the time. Or maybe he was a lawyer, but whatever. But that was a big deal, the Mexican-American War. I mean, we got New Mexico, we got Arizona, we got Southern California. Are we getting ready to take the Yucatan?
I don't think it's going to go that far.
Or Baja?
Particularly since, the White House is saying that this was said in a lighthearted manner. Now, the AP who reported on this, and there was a very good Mexican journalist who reported on this too, there was an excerpt from the conversation, a transcript of the conversation that was somehow provided to them. We don't have Peña Nieto's response. So that's what we don't know.
Right. It's really amazing. A friend of mine and his wife are in Mexico right now looking for a retirement home. We have several friends who have relocated to Mexico in the last couple of years. Jesse Ventura is one of them, actually. Yesterday, Luis was talking to a fellow in Portland, and he was like, I'm moving to Mexico next week. It's like just out of the blue. It's like, it's startling to me how many people I know who have left the United States or are leaving the United States and going to Mexico specifically. Apparently, there's a huge American expat community in about 15 Mexican cities.
That's I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
Huge American expat communities. Anyhow, back to you. The rest of the news of the day.
Other pieces of news as well. It's mostly Trumpish. Let me find something else. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly said today he hoped to have a wall along the southern U.S. border with Mexico finished within 2 years, according to an interview with Fox News. The wall will be built where it's needed first, and then it will be filled in. That's the way I look at it. He said, I really hope to have it done within the next 2 years. He added he thought funding from Congress for the massive project would come relatively quickly.
Right. We'll see. How are they going to pay for this?
Well, it's not clear.
Yeah. Okay.
Federal employees worried that President Trump will gut their agencies are creating new email addresses. Apparently, they're also signing up for encrypted messaging apps like Telegram, things like that, Signal, WhatsApp, and they're looking for all kinds of different ways to push back against the new administration's agenda. The EPA, the Foreign Service, the Labor Department, all kinds of places. So they're using new technology. They're also doing old-fashioned things like meeting, sending letters through the mail, doing all kinds of things to express their dissent.
Is there any chance that the Trump administration will fire the roughly 1,000 Foreign Service officers in the State Department who have come out and said his Muslim ban is bad policy?
There's whistleblower protection against retaliating against dissent memos.
But that, so there's a law against it, but I think my question still stands. Will Trump try it anyway?
I don't know. I think that would be more up to Rex Tillerson, whose first day as Secretary of State was today, and he did speak to many of the workers at the Secretary of State, and gave a very warm speech to them, ending up by saying, "Hello, I'm the new guy."
Interesting. Victoria Jones with Talk Media News. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Hi, it's Thom Hartmann Book Club, and today we're reading from What Would Jefferson Do? And this is from the chapter Warlords, Theocrats, and Aristocrats Rise Again. The subchapter Theocrats Attack Democracy. And the epigraph that we started the chapter with is from President Abraham Lincoln, where he said, "I am approached with the most opposite opinions and advice, and by men who are equally certain that they represent the divine will. I hope it will not be irreverent of me to say that if it is probable that God would reveal his will on such a point so connected with my duty, it might be supposed he would reveal it directly to me." The subhead of the chapter, America is a Christian nation. No, it's a nation where a lot of Christians live. And I read about Judge Moore and his 10 Commandments thing and his statement that, America was founded in Christianity, and then proceed to share the founders' actual view on this. Our founders were both well-schooled in the history of the Crusades and knew from firsthand experience with Puritanism how oppressive religious men could be, even with small amounts of political power. Ben Franklin fled Boston when he was a teenager, in part to escape the oppressive environment created by politically powerful preachers. And for the rest of his life, he was openly hostile to the idea of a secular power being wielded by those who hold also religious power. Although he was fascinated by the spiritual experience, Franklin had little use for the organized religions of his day. In his autobiographical Toward the Mystery, he wrote, quote, "I have found Christian dogma unintelligible. Early in life, I absented myself from Christian assemblies," end quote. In his autobiography, Franklin talks about how he came to this way of thinking, quote, "My parents had early given me religious impressions and brought me through my childhood piously in the Puritan way. But I was scarce 15 when, after doubting by turns of several points, as I found them disputed in the different books I read, I began to doubt of revelation itself. Some books against deism fell into my hands. They were said to be the substance of sermons preached at Boyle's lectures. It happened that they wrought an effect on me quite contrary to what was intended by them, for the arguments of the deists, which were quoted to be refuted, appeared to me much stronger than the refutations, and I soon became a thorough deist," end of quote. Franklin, like most of the more well-known founders, was a deist, subscribing to a philosophy made popular by Unitarians who held that the Creator made the universe long ago and has since chosen not to interfere in any way, that, that neither Jesus nor anybody else was divine, or alternatively, that we are all divine, and that there is only one God and not three. Another founding deist who resisted giving political power to those with religious power was George Washington. Jefferson's diary entry for February 1st, 1799 reads, quote, "When the clergy addressed General Washington on his departure from the government, it was observed in their consultation that he had never, on any occasion, said a word to the public which showed a belief in the Christian religion, and they thought that they should so pen their address as to force him, at length, to declare fidelity whether he was a Christian or not. They did so. However," Jefferson noted, "the old fox was too cunning for them. He answered every article of their address, particularly except that which he passed over without even notice." Jefferson concluded that Washington, quote, "never did say a word on the subject in any of his public papers, and that Governor Morris, a close friend of Washington's, has often told me that General Washington believed no more in that Christian system than he himself did, than Governor Morris did," end of quote, from Jefferson. In fact, President George Washington supervised the language of a treaty with African Muslims that explicitly stated that the United States was a secular nation. The treaty with Tripoli, worked out under Washington's guidance and then signed into law the next year by John Adams in 1797, reads, quote, "As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, and as the said states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against any Muslim nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries," end of quote. But for the founders, this wasn't just an issue of being Christian or not. They didn't want any organized religion mixing its functions with government. For example, on February 21st, 1811, President James Madison vetoed a bill passed by Congress that authorized government payments to a church in Washington, D.C. to help the poor. Faith-based initiatives were a clear violation, in Madison's mind, of the First Amendment doctrine of separation of church and state, and could lead to a dangerous transfer of political power to religious leaders. Caring for the poor was a public and civic duty, a function of government, and should not be allowed to become a hole through which churches could reach and seize political power or the taxpayer's purse. Funding a church to provide for the poor would establish, in Madison's words, a legal agency, a legal precedent that would break down the walls of separation the founders had put between church and states to protect Americans from religious zealots gaining political power. Thus, Madison said in his veto message to Congress, he was striking down the proposed law because it helped a church to, quote, provide for the support of the poor and the education of poor children of the same, which, Madison warned, would be a precedent for giving to religious societies. That would be giving federal funds. Now, things have certainly changed since then, with the faith-based initiative program that started under Reagan has now exploded. But anyhow, the book is What Would Jefferson Do? Really good.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and on the line with us, very pleased to have Farron Cousins, the executive editor of Trial Lawyer Magazine, the co-host of Ring of Fire Radio, contributor to the DesmogBlog.com, and of course the main website for Ring of Fire is TRO, as in the ring of, TROfire.com. And you can tweet Farron at Farron Balanced, Farron Balanced. And Farron, welcome. Welcome back.
Tom, how are you doing today?
Great. Great to have you with us. So you've been working on a water story that is absolutely fascinating. Tell us about this.
Well, you know, this whole issue of the water in Flint, Michigan, you know, it's been a little over a year now, and it really finally, in United States history, put this issue at the forefront, at least for a small amount of time. Back in December, when we had Reuters come out with their massive report that told us that there were 3,000 areas in the United States where the water quality, the lead contamination, was at least double what was found in Flint, Michigan. 3,000 areas where the lead contamination was at least double that of Flint, Michigan.
Why does every American not know this?
Well, it's because it's not a story that's really flashy. It's not something that corporate media can air and get a bunch of eyeballs. It's not something people can really fully understand in 30 seconds. So the corporate media moves on. Maybe Donald Trump tweeted something that morning, so people just moved on to something else. And that is a problem we're seeing right now, too. It just as an aside, a lot of these really massively important stories are getting buried because of the coverage of what Donald Trump says this morning. And yes, it's important, but we have people out here in the United States that are being poisoned every single day, every time they fill up a glass of water, and nobody is talking about it. Nobody is reporting on it. So as Reuters pointed out, we have these 3,000 areas where at least double the lead contamination of Flint, Michigan, all over the country, usually affecting poor neighborhoods for the most part. And it's across the country. It's Philadelphia, it's Cleveland, it's Baltimore, it's small towns in Texas, towns all throughout Alabama and Florida and California. This isn't a localized crisis. This is nationwide. And it's all because, essentially, we as a country are not spending the necessary money. At this point, we may not even have enough money to fix the problem of lead pipes throughout the country and water contamination. And when the two of those interact, when you have highly polluted water going through an 80-year-old lead pipe, those chemicals in the water interact with the lead, causes the lead to leach out into the water, and then go straight into people's glasses, into baby formula. And that is the problem that a lot of people don't quite understand. It's not just the lead pipes. It's the way that the chemicals in the water system already, from industrial pollution, runoff, and things like that, it's how those interact with these aging lead pipes and cause the leaching into the water supply.
You know, up until the 1980s, the United States was continuously updating its infrastructure. Now, you know, the 80s weren't state of the art with regard to lead, but by that point in time, we were figuring out the dangers of lead. In fact, I think it was in the late 70s, I believe, that we started taking lead out of gasoline. But would it be hypersimplistic, Farron, to say that the cause of this problem is that for 40 years, roughly, as a result of Reaganism and austerity economics, conservative economics, whatever you want to call it, Reaganomics, that we have not been maintaining our infrastructure to the state of the art? And the state of the art I remember Bernie, and this was back, 4 or 5 years ago when he was running for re-election for the Senate a couple of years ago. He was in Vermont and, at an event where they were replacing a water pipe. And the water pipe literally had been laid by Civil War soldiers, the original pipe. And back then, everybody loved lead pipe. It was flexible. It was easy to work with. It didn't break easily. It was, and people thought it was safe. Most of the pipe laid in the United States, or much of the pipe laid in the United States in the 19th century and in the early 20th century, was not copper pipe. It was lead pipe. So isn't this really just a function of our failure to maintain our infrastructure to current standards?
It is, and it's a twofold problem. It's not just the infrastructure. That obviously is a huge, huge part of it, but most of these studies that have been done are only looking for lead contamination, which obviously is a big thing. It causes huge cognition problems in infants and children and even adults. It alters brain development, and so that's why lead is the big focus.
Stunts IQ, basically.
Yes, it does. And so even if we fix the lead pipes, though, if we got rid of those, we're still looking at the growing problem of water contamination in general, especially now that we have an administration that is so clearly hostile towards any form of environmental protection, any form of environmental regulation. So this is not a problem that's going to go away just by removing the pipes. You remove a lot of the danger that way, but then we're opened up to all new dangers in the form of mercury in the water, arsenic, and other contaminants, even from household chemicals, pharmaceuticals. I mean, we're detecting antibiotics in the water simply from the waste being processed and sent back into the water system. We have so many pollutants, so many contaminants that we can't even keep track of them. And in addition to the money drying up for the infrastructure, money is now drying up in states and cities all over this country for the lead testing. The only reason we know about what happened in Flint, Michigan is because one doctor came forward and said, look, I am seeing this horrible increase in the amount of lead poisoning in children. Something has to be going on here. She called the Corps of Engineers. They came in and did the testing. That's how we knew about it, because the doctors finally saw this and said, oh my God, something's happening. We don't have that luxury all over the country. Maybe, a smaller town, doctor doesn't quite know what he's looking at or she's looking at. And so they can go undetected. And at that point, when the doctor discovered this in Flint, that dirty water had been flowing for 2 years. And as you know, 2 years of an infant or toddler or adolescent drinking lead-contaminated water is enough to cause permanent, lifelong damage for this human being. And we're not taking care of them. I think that's the biggest problem here, is we're not taking care of citizens of the United States with something as basic as water.
Right.
Nobody's talking about it.
Here's something. We're running out of time here, but I just wanted to share this with you. We're talking with Farron Cousins, the executive editor, Trial Lawyer Magazine, co-host of Ring of Fire Radio, and contributor to Smog Blog, trofire.com. Ann Gorsuch, the mother of the guy that was just nominated for the Supreme Court, was the administrator of the EPA from 1981 to 83. Reagan ultimately fired her because of a scandal. The scandal was that she was dialing back the lead standards. So, you know, as a brilliant writer who pays a lot of attention to what's going on, I just wanted to hand that to you. I don't know if there's a way to connect that to this story, but and you know, have it in some way reflect on Mr. Gorsuch or not. But it's an amazing story. Farron,
absolutely. Thank you for telling me.
Farron Cousins, trofire.com. You can tweet him at Farron, Farron Balanced. What a great Twitter handle, Farron. Farron, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it.
Great talking with you. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls and the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And let's see here, Free Speech TV. Paul in Chicago watching Free Speech TV. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hey.
You know, Trump just promised the religious community to repeal the removal of tax-exempt status for expressing views on political candidates.
Right. It wasn't the first time he said this. He campaigned on it.
Well, he should walk back from that promise for purely selfish reasons. It'll backfire on him because there are many, many clerics who will feel free to denounce him to their congregations, including, by the way, the Pope. The problem is Trump has delusions of grandeur. He thinks everybody loves him as much as he loves himself. He can't see how much pain he's caused already in less than 2 weeks in office, and actually thinks he can be reelected in 4 years despite his rock-bottom approval ratings and millions of people all over the world protesting his actions.
Yeah, we're talking here about what's referred to as the Johnson Amendment that in the 1950s, Lyndon Johnson, when he was the senator from Texas, got pushed through Congress that said basically to the churches, you want tax-exempt status, you want us to pay your property taxes for you. In exchange for that, don't mess in politics, right? Your religion is yours. We give it to you, but don't mess in politics, and we will also subsidize you with tax-exempt status. And yeah, I think you're right. Trump is looking at the mega churches and the right-wing churches that have supported him, and he thinks that that represents the majority of Christendom in the United States, and they don't. You know, they may. It's a very vocal and visible minority, but it's there. And what's particularly ironic is that the right-wing churches that right now are participating in this program that has been going on for about 4 years now, to openly defy the Johnson Amendment, openly defy the law, and preach politics from the pulpit, and record that and send it to the IRS with a nya, nya, nya. And they've been doing this. I mean, they've been actually breaking the law and flaunting it and bragging about it and openly talking about it from the pulpit, whereas the left-wing churches, the progressive churches, or the churches that are just there for religion, they have been very carefully observing the law. So if the law changes so that your tax-exempt status is not endangered by political activity, I think you're absolutely right, Paul. I think that there will be an explosion among the churches who have been following the law, who respect the rule of law, who are not the hard right churches. There'll be an explosion among them of resistance, which could be fascinating. I mean, you know, it's like beware of what you worry for, or what you're what you want. Beware of getting what you want. So, Paul, are you involved with the churches in any way?
Well, no, not really. I'm Jewish, but I must say there.
It applies to synagogues too.
Oh, absolutely, and there are far too many. And he's not currying any favor with any of the Muslims. So the mosques and many of the synagogues, which tend to run progressive, are going to feel free to denounce him.
Yeah, and up until now, they've been following the law. They've been very careful. They've been thoughtful. They've been doing the right thing. Synagogues,
mosques and the progressive churches. I mean, the closest anybody got to, I think it was the United Church of Christ back during the gay wars, saying we welcome gay couples. In fact, they ran a TV ad to that effect, and some of the networks refused to run it because they said it was too inflammatory. Showed two guys holding hands going to church. It's amazing. Anyhow, Paul, thank you. Very, very, a thoughtful commentary, and I think you're spot on. Paul, thanks a lot for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back. The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Dan in Avoca, Iowa. Am I saying that right, Dan?
Hi, Tom. How are you today, sir?
I'm well. How are you, Dan?
Oh, very disappointed
in
what's going on in our country today.
Well, okay, I share your concern.
Yeah, I don't think we're alone, sir.
Yeah. So, what do you plan to do about it?
Well, I've done this. I purchased an electric car.
Mm-hmm.
I put solar panels up.
Mm-hmm.
Got batteries for storage. I took my 401k, what was left of it after 2008, gave most of it to Elon Musk.
Oh, so you invested in Tesla or you bought a car?
No, I have a i3 BMW. I don't have the money to buy an S-Class.
Yeah, they've got a new $35,000, $40,000 car coming out this fall.
Yeah.
But so you invest. See,
trading my BMW in for the Bolt.
Yeah.
Because the Bolt's going to be available a lot sooner than the.
Yeah, this is the new Chevy electric car.
So, but I'm very concerned about the lack of leading by example. I hear a lot of people complaining about a lot of stuff, and I'm one of them. But I live in rural Iowa, and you ought to see some of these farm boys to come and driving by my place and see solar panels. They stare at that like they don't even understand what it is.
Oh, you should hang a sign out front that says free electricity.
I know. I don't even, most of them are Republicans, and they just.
Well, free still, it rings a bell for Republicans.
People, it seems like when you try to communicate with some of these people, all you do is cause anger.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, they've, this is the tragedy of Fox News.
That our taxes has been wasted because if some of these, I know some people have a low IQ. And you're never going to get through to them. But there's some people out there that do have a high enough IQ that if you educate them, they're going to understand what's going on around them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a question.
I mean, it's hopeless with some of these people.
Well, it's, some of, I was reading from a piece a couple of days ago about how in Germany, it was basically the country had been taken over by a cult. Actually, it was Brunhilde. Goebbels, Brunhilde Pomsel, who was Goebbels' secretary, and she said it was like the country was in the thrall of a cult, and that's really what it was. Hitler was a cult leader, Tojo was a cult leader, And frankly, Fox News is a cult, and people buy into this, and it's a very, very comprehensive indoctrination. And it's a cult that's owned by a billionaire, just like the Moonies were, owned by a billionaire, Sun Myung Moon. And so, they promote the interests of the billionaire class exclusively. And if you look at Fox, if you watch Fox News knowing that, that this is the official mouthpiece of the Republican Party, which is the party of billionaires and big corporations, suddenly you can cut through the BS and you can figure out when they're lying to you or deceiving you, or the big thing that Fox does is lies by omission, not giving you all the facts. But if you don't realize that and you just soak it in, which is what happens all across rural America, because Fox is everywhere now and it's free, they actually believe this stuff. Dan, I got to move along, but thank you for the call, the thoughtful comment. Carl in Vernon Hills, Illinois. Hey, Carl, what's up?
Hey, Tom, good to talk to you. I've listening to you on your fantastic podcast, which I usually do.
Thank you.
I got two questions for you, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
One, when you talk about Medicare for all versus single payer, how would we get rid of the drug plans we have now that are gone to go through the insurance? Would that be included in single payer? Would it be just everybody gets their drugs paid for, or something else?
Well, Medicare actually does pay for drugs, and Medicare Part D, I mean, oddly enough, it was passed during the Bush administration, but they put this little caveat in there that the government could not negotiate the price of those drugs. So even though the Medicare administration may be buying, 1 million tablets of penicillin a year for everybody across the country, they have to buy them one at a time at full retail. So if you simply were to change that, which has been a $600 billion a year or a decade subsidy, roughly a $60 billion a year subsidy to big pharma here in the United States. It doesn't happen in any other country in the world, by the way. And so if you were to simply change that so that Medicare could negotiate for pharmaceuticals, close the donut hole, which Obamacare is doing, by the way. We're in the process of, the donut hole will be closed in another couple of years. But allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices and drop the Medicare eligibility age to 0, Medicare and single payer would become the same thing. I would also, close up the 20% hole in Part B that the Republicans drilled in that back in the 1980s, and which opened the door for United Healthcare and other insurance companies to come in and offer Medicare Advantage and Medigap programs and all this kind of stuff, and just let Medicare be Medicare. Just have it pay 100% of everything, and get all these private vendors out of it altogether. Then you've got a true single-payer healthcare system. And we already have it in place. It works. Am I making sense, Carl?
Part D, though, you still have to go through an insurance plan.
No, you wouldn't.
Some insurance. I do now. I go through SilverScript.
Oh, yeah. So right now, what you're buying is insurance that fills in the donut hole in Medicare Part D. And within a few years, that's going to be unnecessary. But that could be closed tomorrow if they simply said, okay, we're not, having the donut hole was their way of giving this giant gift to the pharmaceutical companies. By you buying your drugs at full retail, when it's over $2,000 and less than $5,000 roughly, that's the donut hole. By having you do that, you're subsidizing the drug companies in addition to the federal government subsidizing them for that first $2,000 and for anything over the $5,000. And that should be unnecessary. There should not be a need for that. So, the whole thing needs to be tightened up, needs to be cleaned up, needs to be turned into a real single-payer system. And let's get these banksters who call themselves health insurance companies. Wendell Potter yesterday on this program said they're not really insurance companies because they don't take risks. They're backstopped by the federal government. They're just money machines. They're just banksters. And we could change that. Carl, thank you for the call. We'll be back with more right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Coming up on 28 minutes past the hour, we'll be back with your calls right after the break. There's a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about today. I realize it's supposed to be Anything Goes Friday, and we're gonna take a lot of your calls, but I so wanted to get Adam McKay on to share some good news with us. I realize that a lot of us are still working through, the 5 stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross identified, from denial through bargaining to depression to anger to acceptance. As I recall, that's the order. We just have to get to acceptance as fast as we can. Maybe stay in anger for a little while. And use that then to step forward and get stuff done. So let's talk about it. There's a couple of different things here. Number one, what's happening to our country? There are 2 kinds of populism. There's basically good populism and evil populism. Good populism is what was personified by the Sanders campaign. We're going to make the country work for all the people, right? It's what's personified by the progressive caucus in the House of Representatives and some of the good progressives in the Senate. Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown. This is good populism, positive populism. The dark side populism, or evil populism, let's say, these dark side analogies I'm starting to get a little skitsy about because of the cultural, the perpetual racial overtone to it. But you know what I'm saying here. The evil side populism is the Mussolini-style populism. It's where the populist rises to power by saying, I'm here for you. I'm your champion. I'm going to take on those evil special interests. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to make it happen for you. And they get into power, and what do? They bring all the evil special interests along with them, and they throw a few bones to the people. Mussolini made the trains run on time. Hitler built the Autobahn. Massive infrastructure project. That's how Hitler kicked off his presidency. It was with a massive infrastructure project. But all along the way, these evil populists are consolidating power among themselves and with the elites in ways that are not obvious to the people. People still think that they're in charge. They're out in the streets. They're marching. We're let's go. Evil populism produces stuff like this. This is a tweet from Sean King over on Twitter, ShaunKing, Twitter.com/Sean King. He said, apparently all this has just been waiting to erupt from the dark depths of America's racist psyche. This is from a school teacher. I'm sorry, a friend of mine, Don, said, sent me a tip about this, although I follow Sean King. I missed this particular one. Don sent it to me, and that's what Don said. This is what Sean said. Sean said, this is from a school teacher. Well, actually, here's the tweet. The tweet is from Simone. It's her full name is on there. I don't know if she wants it said on the radio, so I'm not going to. So she said, so one of my students' aunts had to go pick up her daughter from school today because a boy grabbed her vagina. She's 10. When asked why, he said that if a president can do it, I can do it. Day one. And Sean King comments, this is from a school teacher. I have dozens just like this of young girls who had their crotches grabbed yesterday in the name of Donald Trump. We're seeing swastikas painted on synagogues and Muslim, what do you call a Muslim church? A mosque, thank you. And mosques, we're having, so that is evil populism. How do you counter that? What do you do with that? You call it out, you protest it, you fight against it. So here's the question. And it's, I only have a minute left. It's going to take more than a minute to get into this. So I'll continue this rant just a little bit after the bottom of the hour, and then we'll pick up your calls, your thoughts on this. But, the last couple of days, I have talked about pseudo-Keynesianism, about how Reagan basically spent his way out of the worst recession since the Great Depression in 1982, spent his way out of it. He's using the classic John Maynard Keynes fiscal stimulus. And that now Trump is talking about doing the same thing. Obama tried to do it in a responsible way. In other words, do it and pay for it by raising taxes on the rich. Trump is talking about doing it in an irresponsible way, which is doing it and don't pay for it. Just raise the national debt, and then 4 or 8 years from now, when there's a Democrat in office, start obstructing again and start screaming about the national debt that you ran up, right? I mean, this is just classic. This is the old, the old rope-a-dope. We saw this during Reagan, and they're getting ready to play this whole game all over again. A bunch of Democrats want to go along with them and say, we need the infrastructure. Others are saying, no, we need to block everything. What say you?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'm inclined to fight them, to absolutely fight them on everything. If it's not clean, it's not transparent, and it's not honest, don't go there. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation. Amazing. People over on Twitter and in our chat room looking at the pictures of the military convoy. It turns out it was a group of Navy SEALs driving 8 Humvees, unmarked. Apparently military vehicles don't have to have license plates. They've got a registration number, a serial number that's kind of in the camouflage. But in any case, driving down the street with a giant Trump flag. The word Trump is a giant flag hanging out the front of it. And one of them says they were on their way to a Walmart detention center as part of the Jane Helm exercise, says Barry Sullivan. Or Madam President said, I actually thought this was a picture from Aleppo. Right. And, and over in our chat room, Chris Capello has said, hey, did you know that Donald Trump's pick for the Supreme Court when he was in high school created a club called Fascism Forever? Yeah. Although like I said, he was in high school and it was a Jesuit all-boys prep school and you do stuff when you're in high school. I'm not willing to, I did stupid stuff when I was in high school. So I'm not willing to go after him for that, but I do think that it tells us that, with his mother being the person, we're talking about Neil Gorsuch, with his mother being the person that Reagan hired to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency, and she did such a good job that Reagan had to fire her in '83 in scandal over lead standards, ironically. And clearly, this guy was, raised in this right-wing white privilege little bubble, of the bubble of wealth and power and the Republican Party. So should we be surprised that he is who he is and he takes the positions he does? No. Should we put him on the Supreme Court? No. It's a stolen seat. That is Merrick Garland's seat. And beyond that, if Democrats don't want to vote for another Scalia, they shouldn't do it. It's that simple. And let Mitch McConnell go nuclear and change the filibuster rules. My prediction is that he'll change the filibuster rules. He'll get this through, and then he'll change the rules back, so that the Democrats will be faced with the same kind of Hobson's choice. But we'll see. Mike in Chicago, listening to WCPT. Hey, Mike, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how you doing?
Good. What's up?
Happy Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Hey, saw his shadow.
I wanted to offer you a question, and then upon your answer, I wanted to put something out there that seems to be a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what is the purpose of having health care insurance?
It is to facilitate the delivery of health care through payments.
In other words, to pay for it, right?
Right.
And what is the goal of a healthcare insurance company?
To make money.
Oh,
they are for-profit companies. So by law and tradition, their first priority is making money. It's not keeping people healthy.
But isn't that a conflict then?
Yes, of course it is. That's why I keep saying, why are we the only country in the world, at least the only developed country in the world, that allows for-profit banksters to run primary health insurance? No other country allows that.
But that's the thing. When conservatives are suggesting that to everything in the free marketplace, and basically borrowing from one of your other listeners, Paul, saying that you're buying into a casino who everything is in their favor.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense. it's working against the consumer in every way because of the way that it's designed, that they're looking to make money. They're always going to cut back on something and hurt you in the long run. So, I mean, I don't understand why conservatives can't understand how this does not benefit the American people.
It's not about conservative. It's about Republican. There's a difference. A conservative, a genuine conservative, a conservative of my father's generation, a William F. Buckley conservative, a conservative who says, we need to conserve. We need to do things. We need to make change. We want to move forward, but we want to do so slowly and carefully. We want to do things in the way that's most efficient. A true conservative would look at our healthcare situation and say, we're paying almost twice as much as any other country on earth for healthcare because of these bankster leeches called for-profit health insurance companies. And now, governors like Mike Pence have even the governor from Ohio, John Kasich, have even inserted these for-profit companies into Medicaid so that they're skimming off, federal money as well. And in fact, that was the exemption or the allowance or whatever that Obamacare offered the Republican governors, and a couple of them took it up on it. And it's crazy. A genuine conservative would say, hey, let's save half the money. We don't need this industry. This industry is just a parasite. And I think the proof of it is that there's over 100 people making over $1 million a year at United Healthcare, if Robert Greenwald's reporting is to be believed, and the CEO has taken over $1 billion, and this is bankster level stuff. And so, yeah, it just makes perfect sense. Mike, I've got to move along, but thank you for the call. Marie is it Marie in Portland, Oregon?
Marie. Yeah,
Marie. Hey, Marie, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to put something out there in light of everything Aquatius and all the water things we're going through with the DAPL and the lead in the water system.
Marie, I'm having a really hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. I'll talk up. Hold on.
Are you
okay,
on?
I'll talk. Is that better?
That's a lot better.
Okay. I took the phone off speakerphone. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to say, with all the water things that are going on between DAPL and the lead in the water systems and everything that's going on, why don't we take the momentum of the Tea Party and turn it into the Water Party? Because that's what we need more than anything else. I think is water representation at this point.
Well, that's a great idea. I think the 3,000 communities in America that have worse lead problems than Flint, Michigan should be aggressively notified and should start absolutely raising hell and should be protesting every single day. This is a national disgrace, and I would say the largest part of the disgrace is that none of our media has focused on it. I mean, this is destroying lives. Somebody has their IQ knocked down 10 points. That ruins their future earning ability. It hurts their ability to have relationships. It increases the probability that they're going to end up in prison. I mean, there are all these problems associated with lead poisoning, and
absolutely,
and that should be just like huge news. And none of the corporate media will talk about it because either it's not a sexy story, or because there's no money to be made for the Republicans, or it reflects poorly on on Reaganomics, which says that we don't need infrastructure. Leave it to the private sector; they'll figure it out. Yeah, spot on, Marie. Thank you for the call. Ryan in Stanwood, Washington. Hey, Ryan, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How you doing?
Good. Solar panels?
I just wanted to talk about a theory that I had regarding the trade attack they're going after China.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the solar panel prices dropping so quickly has the oil oligarchs very nervous. And I believe they want to try and keep the prices from dropping any further for as long as they can, because they know that the prices have reached parity with...
Right. Solar is actually now less expensive than coal, gas, or natural gas or oil, with a few exceptions.
I see them going after the oil in the South China Sea also, but I really believe that the main focus is their fear of clean energy prices dropping so quickly.
Yeah. And battery prices have dropped in half in the last 4 years. That's the other thing.
Excuse me?
And battery prices, large storage batteries, and this is because of Elon Musk and his and his giant battery factory, and his plans to build 100 of them, which you can see a fascinating interview with him and Leo DiCaprio in the movie Before the Flood. It's amazing. I mean, solar power, wind power, they're here, they're now, and they are fully competitive with any other form of energy.
Yeah, it makes me very nervous how far they're going to take their totalitarianism to hold on to power as long as they can.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't call it totalitarianism, though. I would call it fascism. It's the merger of corporate and state interests. And about half of the utilities in the United States are for-profit utilities. So they want to keep that central, electricity manufacturing station. And they want to keep the system, so they're trying to make it even harder and more expensive for people to solarize. It's crazy. Thanks, Ryan.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
15 minutes before the hour, back with more of your calls right after this. And welcome back. Pat, watching Free Speech TV in LaPorte, Indiana. Hey, Pat, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Yesterday, I got a text message from Our Revolution encouraging me to contact my local Democratic Party to get on a list to become a precinct committee person.
Really? That's
the cutoff
great.
for that was noon today. So I did that because I got real activated when Bernie was running. I had meetings at my house and did phone banking and so forth. So I thought, get going, like you suggested, get in on the grassroots movement, contact your Democratic Party. The door got slammed in my face harder than I ever expected.
Really? What happened?
I was told by our chairman of the Democratic Party here in LaPorte County that he would never put anyone on the list who he didn't know personally, and that, as far as he was concerned, that list was closed. He was also very frustrated because he said he had over 500 women call him yesterday or email him yesterday about this exact issue. And so I contacted Our Revolution via text message and let them know, how I got responded to from our Democratic chairperson.
Right.
And they came back and said, well, I guess that's just establishment politics. And they said, but at least our outreach was successful. So I have a feeling that happened all over the state of Indiana yesterday.
Right.
And I still am just angry and appalled at the way I was received.
Yeah. Here's, we should get Larry Cohen back on. In fact, we'll try to do that for early next week. Larry Cohen is the CEO of Our Revolution, and to talk about this. But I would think that the thing to do, Pat, is to learn everything you can about how your Democratic Party operates in LaPorte, Indiana. The time will come when the party has elections, and for its leadership and for its senior membership. Some of these are elected. At least the very top are elected officials, and the plan might be, if they've got 30 people who show up for their meetings, you show up with 50 and make sure that they're all registered Democrats so that they could all vote in the election, and vote those bums out and vote you in. I'm guessing that there's...
His suggestion to me was to contact the LaPorte County Democratic Civics Club and get involved that way. It was almost as if he was suggesting that because he didn't know me personally, that, he was suggesting I get involved at a lower level.
Right. Well, there is something to be said for, if I was running a local Democratic Party and somebody just showed up, in this day and age, the first thought in my mind would be, is this somebody from Project Veritas? Is this one of James O'Keefe's people who's going to punk me? Is this somebody who's trying to screw with my party? But I'm guessing that by the time he had a bunch of inquiries, he had figured out that this was not that. And But like I said, that guy is there because of an election. And anybody who's anywhere because of an election can be unelected. And so I would, if that had happened to me, I would make it my mission to get this guy out of office. So, if you learn more about what can be done to take over a local Democratic Party, or at least yours in LaPorte, Indiana, Pat, call us back and let us know, would you? Welcome back. It's 11 minutes before the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Steve in DeKalb, Illinois. Hey, Steve, what's up? Or is it DeKalb?
Sorry about that, Tom.
That's okay. Is it? It's DeKalb, right?
It's DeKalb, Illinois. I'm just wondering. I mean, cutting to the extreme bottom of what's going on here. This is what looks like a soft coup. And we're playing with words on all of the nightly cable news shows where we refer to lies as some other term,
right,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just curious, what drives you? How do you? I mean, you see the same thing I do.
Yep.
I'm just curious how you make it. What you're using to make it through this.
Sure. Well, thank you, Steve. That's a really good question. In fact, it's funny. The other night, I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was just laying there, what's called ruminating. Right? It's where you're thinking of all the terrible things that can happen. and I caught myself, and I was like, wait a minute. I'm ruminating. This is not healthy. This is psychologically not healthy. And so I actually, I had already picked up my phone and started reading a novel that I've been reading to kind of take my mind off things. And I sent myself an email saying, make a list of all the things the good things that could happen as a result of your efforts. And I've been making that mental list. I've been trying to put on my future timeline all the positive outcomes that could come out of the Trump presidency. And we're starting to see them already. The Women's March, the pushback, all over the country, members of Congress, their offices are being mobbed. The media is not doing a particularly good job of following it, but it's there and it's real. People are being activated. This new organization, indivisibleguide.com, I think it is their website, might be .org. We've had one of the founders of it on this program twice now in the last couple of weeks. Is extraordinary what they're doing. Our revolution is extraordinary what they're doing. People are waking up. People are getting motivated. People are getting mobilized. All over the world, people are waking up, frankly, as a result of the Trump administration. So
I agree with that. I'm amazed at all of the pop-up dissension that's going on with lots and lots of people.
This is a healthy thing.
I'm also seeing the Trump administration just moving forward with, just those darn phone calls that happened yesterday. I'm worried that we're going to get into a war with Iran and the repercussions from that. And I think back to the W. Bush administration, how that was just a steamroll that we could not divert.
Yeah.
And this appears to be that on steroids.
Well, it may be, but now Americans look back. The consequence of George W. Bush lying us into a war in Iraq was not unlike the consequences of Lyndon Johnson lying us into a war with South Vietnam. In both cases, for a generation or two afterwards, people were wary of the president, what the president had to say, and wary of foreign wars and foreign involvements. So it's tragic that it took the death of 2 million Vietnamese and 54,000 Americans, or 56,000 Americans in Vietnam. It's tragic that it took the death of well over 1 million Iraqis and probably 1 million Afghans, and the displacement of 5 to 10 million from both countries. And then, Libya and Syria and Yemen and all the dominoes that have been falling ever since Bush started his illegal wars in the Middle East. But we are waking up. So, and I realize that I can say that from the comfort of this chair where there aren't bombs falling on me and my children are not under assault or under siege or starving to death in Aleppo or whatever it may be. I get that. But the net of what I'm saying is that even the most awful stuff sometimes produces, very often produces, in fact, usually produces, ultimately a very positive result.
TV on every social media outlet. I belong to every one of them. I think that, MSNBC is now pretty much to the curb as far as progressives and...
Yeah, I think with the exception of Rachel Maddow's show, the whole network is shifting hard to the right.
Yeah, so, I really think that free speech TV needs to be the future, and I'm there with you guys. I hope that, there's continues to be a major push to have high-quality programming that people need or are used to seeing.
Yeah.
With talking
No, we need this right across the board, and also, don't forget Sirius 127, which is Sirius Progress, their progressive channel, which is nationwide. In fact, it's all over the North American continent. So there's some really great venues for progressive information out there. And Steve, thank you for the call. But just apropos of Steve's question, we can't just focus on the negative. If we do, we get paralyzed. And, fear is paralyzing. Panic is paralyzing. Despair is paralyzing. There's, as Bernie said, despair is not an option, and neither are fear and panic. We need to look with a clear eye at what's going on. And we also need, with a clear eye, to project out into the future all the bad that can happen, but also all the good that can happen, all the things that we're grateful for, all the extraordinary things that we have in this country that we can use to make this country better. And set a positive goal. We want to bring back the New Deal. We want to reform America, for the middle class, for the working people of this country, rather than for the billionaires. It's just very straightforward. We need to do that. And individually, we need to be thinking in those terms. Think about the positive. Every day, make a list if you can. David in Woodland Hills, California. We got a minute and a half till the end of the show. David, what's up?
Well, you've asked what we've been doing in the face of this strange new world, and you inspired me to write the People's Declaration of Independence. It's under 50 words. I'd love your critique.
Okay, go for it.
We, the people of planet Earth, declare the end of greed, hatred, and warfare. We, the people of planet Earth, declare that housing, education, a generous guaranteed minimum income, clean food, water, and air, and absolutely free health care are basic human rights for everyone, everywhere. Without greed, we, the people of planet Earth, declare there is enough wealth, abundance, and prosperity for everyone, everywhere.
What you just read is very similar to a document that the United States has signed as a treaty, which is now should be part of our law, and we're in violation of federal law or of international law and federal law, for that matter, every day that we ignore it. And it's called the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and which comes right out and says, healthcare is a right, housing is a right, food is a right, education is a right. These are not privileges. And we signed on to that thing back 30 years ago when it was, and all the European countries did too. They all took it seriously, and we didn't. And I think it's brilliant what you wrote, David, and I congratulate you on it. And this is a great set of core values. And I think most Americans get this. David, thank you for the call, and thanks for listening to SiriusXM. Most Americans get this. We need to now move this forward. We need to create a movement, not a moment, as Joe Madison says, a movement. And I mean, we can have moments, but let's turn them into movements and move forward and move this country in a positive and progressive direction. It is within our power. And frankly, I look around and I think it is happening. As much as the grotesqueries coming out of the Trump administration are happening, and the Republican Party. And let's not forget to always tie the two together. Anyhow, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you to tag your it. We'll see you.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.